has written to the public protector, Koleka Gcaleka, requesting her to investigate political interference, executive misconduct and the orchestrated collapse of the political killings task team under the direction of Police Minister Senzo Mchunu as a matter of urgency. KwaZulu-Natal Police Commissioner Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi has alleged that Mchunu is affiliated to persons linked to criminal activities. ATM spokesperson Zaman Jona.
We argue in our letter that the minister's actions not only violate constitutional principles of accountability and conflict of interest, but also threaten the integrity of our criminal justice system. This is why we call on the public protector, Advocate Gcaleka, to put everything aside and focus on this particular matter, because this is a matter of national security.
Southeast Europe is suffering continued extreme weather, with wildfires and storms taking a toll across many parts. Temperatures have once again exceeded 42 degrees Celsius, and there have been warnings of more severe conditions to come. The BBC's Paul Moss has the story.
The Acropolis is the most popular tourist site for visitors to Greece, but Tuesday saw them barred from the site during daytime because of dangerously hot temperatures. The country is also seeing an average of 50 wildfires break out every day, while emergency services in nearby Serbia tackled 620 fires on Monday alone. Further north, it's storms which are causing damage. Falling trees brought down power lines in Croatia and Hungary, and gale-force winds blew the roofs off buildings in Slovakia, disrupting road and rail transport.
For any news stories you would like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa News, I'm Chorani Tulo Wepe.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
In our sports headline, Rassie Erasmus has selected veteran fullback Veli Leroux to become the 8th Springbok Centurion. And CAF has begun its final round of host nations inspections and readiness workshops. I'll be back with these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
Let's get into our Africa Roundup now. So this is when, after the news on the show, we give you some stories to look into in terms of what you could have missed from the day before. And it also serves as a sort of throw forward in what you can expect in developments and stories in and around our continent. Let's start with Liberia, where the president there, Joseph Boakai, has launched what his office calls an unprecedented reconciliation campaign, leading memorials for 2 assassinated former presidents and issuing the government's first official apology to victims of the country's civil wars.
Liberia has borne the wounds of history. These wrongs have left scars, but they have also left us with responsibility.
Boakai's apology came on Saturday at an event in the capital, Monrovia, where he pledged to make July 5th an annual day of remembrance. The effort comes more than 2 decades after the end of bloody civil wars that left some 200,000 dead and saw widespread massacres, rapes, and the use of child soldiers. Boakai recently spoke at a reburial service for President William Tolbert, who was executed in a 1980 coup. Tolbert's reburial is part of an effort to identify his remains and those of others killed by those who seized power. Human rights groups have repeatedly called for domestic war crimes prosecutions, but those have yet to start.
Technical issue. So to Kenya now, where Monday's Saba Saba protests turned violent. At least 2 hospitals were damaged and 11 people reported dead during the pro-democracy demonstrations. Witnesses and hospital officials say the unrest overwhelmed emergency services.
Normality returned to the streets of Kenya's capital Nairobi on Tuesday, the day after nationwide demonstrations turned deadly. Police said 11 people were killed and 52 officers injured on Monday in the latest anti-government protests to end in bloodshed. They did not say who was responsible for the killings. Former Prime Minister Raila Odinga called for comprehensive reforms to what he described as a rogue police force.
We must end impunity and corruption within our three arms of government. Our leaders must become modest, ethical, humble, and accountable.
Law enforcement has been deployed heavily in Nairobi since youth-led protests in June 2024. But the death of a blogger, Albert Ojwang, in police custody last month has given fresh impetus to the protest movement.
The first malaria treatment suitable for babies and very young children has been approved for use and is expected to be rolled out in Africa within weeks. The new vaccine is expected to be offered on a largely not-for-profit basis. The BBC's global health correspondent Dominic Hughes reports.
In 2023, malaria was linked to almost 600,000 deaths, around 3/4 of them in children under 5 years old. Malaria treatments do exist, but until now there were none specifically for the very youngest babies and small children. Doses for older children may not be safe for babies whose liver functions are still developing and who process medicines differently. The new treatment, developed by the drug company Novartis, has been approved by authorities in Switzerland and is likely to be rolled out in the worst-hit regions within weeks.
And finally, the Esports World Cup has kicked off in Saudi Arabia with 25 games on the roster and nearly $70 million in prize money. It's the world's biggest gaming competition, but the event has also drawn criticism over the host nation's human rights record. BBC's Andrew Rogers reports.
The organisers have told us that everybody is welcome and that they want everyone to be getting involved in the Esports World Cup. However, lots of fans and players say that they don't feel that that really rings true with them. It's also worth saying there's been some criticism for a lack of specifically female events. Out of 26 events that are taking place, there's only one which is specifically for women. And what it all means is that some of these teams are having to make difficult decisions between fans and players who might not be happy about it taking part.
And that's how we come to an end of today's segment of the Africa Roundup. Coming up, we zoom into the West African region of the continent, where we get analysis from our resident analyst and commentator. Peter will be spearheading that conversation. Stay with us.
The rhythm of Africa, the pulse of the continent. This is Channel Africa, the African perspective. Are you fluent in French, Chinyanja, Portuguese, and Kiswahili? Are you passionate about radio? And are you looking to work in South Africa? Do you have papers that qualify you to work in South Africa? In that case, we might have an opportunity for you to work for Channel Africa. Send us your CV and demo at newsroom@channelafrica.co.za. Remember, if you don't hear from us within 14 days, it means you have not made it or you have not been selected. Channel Africa, the African perspective. The Midnight Snack, 12 to 3 a.m.
Young couples or young people that are getting married, we often hear of divorces, that they're getting divorced, and it's quite worrying because when we attend these weddings, we want to see these people flourish and celebrate 30-year anniversaries. What do you think is the main challenge that is facing newlyweds?
We say that tell me how you were raised and I'll tell you how you love. So when we see people getting married, that's not where the relationship actually starts. The relationship starts with how you were raised, what you were familiar with, because we are attracted to what we are familiar with. If you don't have a background where love was prominent, where love was authentic, it's going to be very difficult for you to manufacture that in later life. So our upbringing has something to do with it.
The Midnight Snack, every Monday, 12 to 3 a.m. with Chanduko Ligege. New day, new stories. Start your morning right with Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Right, off to West Africa we go as we take a look at some stories there in a bit more detail. There's quite a few developments that have been taking place there, raising fresh political, economic and diplomatic questions across the region. Nigeria facing US tariffs, 3 Sahel nations, Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, launching an ambitious agricultural alliance. Senegal, the Prime Minister there, Ousmane Sonko, has criticized the growing trend of unilateralism by powerful nations like the US, and also concerns continue to mount in Mali, where the military junta appears to be settling into power of despite earlier promises of a democratic transition. Well, let's unpack some of these issues, and we're joined by our political expert, commentator, who's also a conflict resolution expert, Dr. David Matsanga. Always good to have you on the program. Good morning, Dr. Matsanga.
Good morning, my veteran brother Ndoro. Thank you very much for keeping Africa working very far away today, trying to be in the headquarters of African Union and see what we can do today.
And when I hear the word veteran nowadays, I hear as a polite way of saying old.
No, I think veteran means we have been in this game with you for a long time.
All right.
And we have done our best for Africa. We have spoken our minds. And the people have not, if those who listen will listen. Those who don't listen can see what we predicted a long time ago. Thank you.
I hear you, Dr. Matsanga. All right, let's begin in Nigeria. Reports suggest that the U.S. plans to impose a 10% tariff on Nigerian exports as a consequence of the country's deepening alignment with the BRICS grouping. Is this the U.S. just, in fact, I say the U.S., and it's probably more accurate to say Donald Trump, on this obsession that he has with punishing anybody that slightly has an inclination towards any ideas that he doesn't like?
I think, Peter, if we had people in Africa thinking, if we had people in Africa who see far, like the giraffe of Kenya National Park or Kruger National Park, it sees far. That is why Western democracies beat us. We have people think tanks who think very far. The 4 years of Trump are going to be the doorstep to hell. That is very true. And we should have known that this was coming. You saw South Africa itself was being destabilized by Trump. Allegations of genocide, of where there was no genocide. So all African countries should have known that Trump is not a man who is going to be on our side. And I told people a long time ago, the biggest problem, Peter, which we have across Africa, you have faced it, I've faced it. African countries, African governments don't listen to black people like Peter, who are experts, who knows one thing or the other. This thing was coming. We saw it coming. Nigeria knows. There is nothing in Nigeria, Peter. If you add more tariffs on Nigeria, you finished. The Nigeria is gone. The economy is gone. Everything is gone. Insecurity is gone. They are killing their own people. The army has turned on killing people. So we have nothing more or less there. These tariffs are going to hurt every African country. My country, Uganda, I am sure it is on the target because you can see Uganda has joined the BRICS. We are there and we don't care, Mr. Trump. We have our food and which is organic. You have your the MG or some, what are they called, those things there that make us change our lifestyle. So it is going to happen and we must prepare for this, Peter.
So what should our response be as a continent to these tariffs? Do we fight back with tariffs?
You can't fight America back with tariffs because you are even not united. Today, Trump has called 5 leaders, 5 small countries surrounding that state of Nigeria, which is about to collapse. He picked them, divided them. You know, the doctrine of neocolonialism and the colonialism is here. And you come divide and rule, pick 5 and take to White House, give them about $100 each quietly, or 200,000 quietly. I want you to prepare to overthrow Burkina Faso man. That's what they are doing. You know it, Peter. We have reached a stage. You and I should not speak anything quoting anyone. We should speak our mind, Jermaine. This continent is going down. Look at these 5 presidents. They can say, no, we are not coming if the others are not coming. But you see, they are wearing suits, already running. I think they are already in Washington preparing to go as if they are going to see Jesus. Is Trump Jesus? Is Trump God? He also prays to God like we do. So we should stand up and unite ourselves as Africans and say enough is enough. But we are not united. AU is captured. Everybody is captured. The others are looking for money. They bank money outside their countries. So God, we are on our own. You read that book, God for Us. I think everybody on his own.
Okay, let's go to President Joseph Boakai, who's issued Liberia's first official apology to victims of its civil wars and honored two assassinated former leaders. How significant do you think this gesture is in terms of truth, reconciliation, and perhaps healing?
That is one step forward. And as a conflict resolution expert, I want to laud the president of Liberia. Thank you. Thank you. Some presidents in Africa don't listen. Ndoro, a redemption strategy. And I repeat, you can go to near Angel Gabriel and ask him what is a redemption strategy. How did Mandela heal the wounds of apartheid? Mandela used a redemption strategy, Peter. He came back and said, no, I've come out of prison. I've been in prison, but I'm not going to witch hunt, no revenge. Let's reconcile. Most African leaders are facing a problem today. They don't want to do a reconciliation, truth-telling, accountability, restitution, reparation, which leads to healing. The families of the two presidents, the supporters of the former presidents who were assassinated, killed, maimed, whether it is Idi Amin, whether we have done it. For us, we have done it. We have gone over it. Idi Amin killed us in Uganda. But when we came back, we overthrew him in 1978, took power. Some people did not want to reconcile. But Uganda today has reconciled. We know, we look at the things that Idi Amin did. The gesture that this president of Liberia has done. Most African countries, please, and mark these African countries who claim to know some things, but they don't know. Redemption strategy is the only way out. It has got 6 components. All of them lead to one word called healing. And that is what Desmond Tutu did in South Africa. You see where you are seated. You would not be in that studio, brother. There used to be a white guy in that studio on that microphone, and then they will give you another microphone somewhere else. Redemption strategy works. Healing works. A good gesture from Liberia.
So what might be the political or legal implications to this apology, especially when it comes to justice for the victims and calls for accountability?
You come back and what did we do? I'll give you practical. I teach political science in this way. I say comparative politics. What did we do in Uganda? Kony killed more people than the people who died in Liberia. I was the chief negotiator. I negotiated that agreement. I proposed what we call redemption strategy of amnesty commission. An amnesty commission, truth-telling. I returned over 82,000 people abducted by Kony. I returned them. Our commission returned them to Uganda. Some of them have been absorbed in the army. Some of them are very fruitful, useful businessmen, gone to school. It is now almost 20 years ago. So you need to do what we call healing process, where people come back and say, I killed, but I'm here. Forgive me. Those who had heinous crimes will go to court if you need a court at all. Kachacha courts in Rwanda, would you think that a Hutu would be walking on the streets of Kigali today? You and I covered Rwanda. You remember? We covered. You saw what was going on there. But they are working together. So this is a healing process where people come out openly, remove what is in their chests, come out and say, I was the leader of South African intelligence system during apartheid. I killed Stephen Biko. Forgive me. Are you not living together? Some African countries don't want even to listen. There you are. Let them go on. Yeah. We are here to see, but our role is to talk. Yes.
Okay. Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso, I know is one of the subjects that you like to talk about. They've launched this regional initiative for agricultural seed production, dubbed the Alliance of Agricultural Seed Producers of the Sahel. What do you make of this intent, this initiative? Some might speculate that given the political isolation of these countries, it's more about survival strategy or a long-term attempt of building self-reliance outside of the ECOWAS umbrella.
These countries left the station a long time ago. Peter Ndoro, I invite you, I will get you a ticket. We go and meet Mr. Tuore. Yes, Ibrahim would like to meet you and me. I'll take you there. I have gone there 6 times. These guys have changed that place. A desert is producing some tomatoes, cabbage, onions, rice. Things are changing up there. And this is a welcome, because some of these younger people who have taken power, they are listening. When you go to his country in the capital city, he respects you. He wants to know. He doesn't speak French, but he wants to sit down and listen to you and say, he understands English. He says, that's a good idea. This young man and the other one in Niger, who is the oldest amongst them, my dear friend, if you go there and then you start that you want to remove them, people will reach you on the streets of their capitals. They don't want, because they had corrupt civilian governments, corrupt, that had sold these countries to the French. So what do? These guys have done very well. Agriculture is moving. They are wiping. They are fighting insurgency. Of course, you know who funds ISIS, Al-Qaeda, in the Maghreb. You know. You and I don't want to say here, but if you want me to say here, I can say, we know. We know who funds this against now the generals. They have been fighting insurgents, but they have turned on agriculture as a means. Burkina Faso, for example, has bought tractors, 800,000 tractors, instead of buying Prados. It has given tractors. It has given ambulances. Which country in Africa here has got 1,000 mobile ambulances with doctors equipped inside and mini theater inside? Which one? Show me. Those countries are doing very well. They sold their uranium, gold, diamond. They have done very well. I bet AU should start talking to these countries. Change the charter. Return them to the African Union. They are our brothers. Let's not isolate them.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about Mali in particular. 5 years now after the coup, the military has once again postponed elections. What does this mean for the future of democracy in Mali and maybe even the Greater Sahel?
What, Peter? What democracy? Which one? you at least you in South Africa, you can talk of democracy, my brother. Is there democracy in Africa here? Where is it? Which one? Which one? We need to go back and define what democracy is. I think the Western type of democracy in Africa cannot work. It can only work in South Africa. You are the only people on the continent of Africa, brother, who vote, who can come, vote, and go home without a stone thrown at Peter Ndoro's car, without a bloodshed on the streets of Johannesburg, Cape Town, and Pretoria or Durban. You vote and go home. The rest of Africa, my dear brother, Ghana, Liberia, Senegal. Those are countries where there is some semblance. You call Nigeria, for example, I think if you had been in elections in Nigeria, you would just run to Atlantic Ocean and hide, take cover. There's no election. Watch democracy. So when you talk about democracy, let's define which democracy. Time has come for us in Africa to find another format. And that format is consensus democracy. The democracy of consensus, of agreeing. Opposition in Africa is funded from abroad, Peter. There is no opposition in Africa. There is ghost opposition funded by George Soros, funded by Ford Foundation, that come to claim to be opposition. There's no opposition. My country, Uganda itself, which opposition is there? Museveni is going to win 100%. I'm telling you, I'm not a supporter of President Museveni, but he's going to win because there's no opposition there. Right. He's not there, fragmented into several pieces.
Right.
One is from Germany, one is from Brussels, another one from Britain, another one from America. What opposition is there? Democracy is not worth it. Let's go back to China style. 40 years ago, China was very poor.
Yes, Dr.
Peter,
Matsanga,
you remember?
I wish I could talk for longer with you because our conversations are always fascinating and gripping. But unfortunately, time is not on our side. So thank you so much indeed, always, for your enlightening insights.
Thank you very much for inviting me and you and Asanda. I always promote this program across the continent of Africa. Let our voices be heard, and I will continue to be there all the time to stand by you. Let me proceed to Addis to make sure that I make some change coming out from Addis Ababa.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Safe travels. Thank you so much, Dr. Matsanga. And that brings us to 6:30, which means it's time for your news headlines. Here's Jwalane Tulo. Mwepe.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning. Making headlines, Liberian President Joseph Boakai has launched what his office describes as an unprecedented reconciliation campaign. The campaign will be overseeing memorial services for 2 assassinated presidents and issuing the government's first apology to war victims. South Africa's National Assembly Speaker Togo Didiza has confirmed that she is considering a course of action following KwaZulu-Natal Police Commissioner Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi's allegations. In a media briefing last weekend, Mkhwanazi made damning allegations against senior police officials. And finally, the death toll in the aftermath of the catastrophic flash flooding in the U.S. state of Texas has risen to 110, while those missing have now exceeded 160. I will have details on these and other stories at 7 o'clock.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Right now, let's say good morning to Figile Lingwati, who's got our sports news.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning, guys. We begin with rugby news. Veteran fullback Veli Leroux will become the 8th Springbok centurion on Saturday when South Africa meet Italy in the second test at the Nelson Mandela Bay Stadium in Gqeberha in South Africa's Eastern Cape province. Leroux is one of just 7 players in the 23-man match day squad who featured in the first test at Loftus Versfeld last weekend. A new look team, which will be captained by Salman Murad, includes 3 uncapped players on the bench. They are prop Asenati Ntlabanganye, utility forward Kuwas Vise, and utility back Ethan Hooker. The 7 players who will face the Azuri for the second week in a row are Leroux, Velcolo, Malcolm Marx, Marco van Staden, and Jasper Vise, all of whom have been named in the starting lineup, while Oxenche and Jan-Hendrik Wessels will make an impact off the replacement bench. The backline has also been overhauled. Regular captain Siya Kolisi is still being managed to niggles and was not considered, while World Rugby Player of the Year Peter Steve du Toit makes a welcome return from injury and starts at flank. Botswana head coach Alex Malete says he has instructed the team to remain calm when they face Nigeria in the second WAFCON Group B clash on Thursday. The Maize will look to redeem themselves coming on the back of a 1-0 defeat to Algeria in the tournament opener at Perejago. Maleti says they look to express themselves more against Nigeria to make sure that they don't repeat the same mistakes from the previous match.
We have to be calm and not desperate when we face Nigeria. We have to, express ourselves, be able to express ourselves in terms of things that we do well. Look at Nigeria as well and see what they do well and see what they struggle with and do our best to use that to our advantage. But what I'm happy about is the positivity within the camp, is the spirit within the camp, is the unity.
And we end with the Be Active Group, one of South Africa's leading youth sports and development companies, currently works with over 150 schools across Gauteng and Western Cape provinces, reaching more than 20,000 children weekly through a wide range of sport and enrichment programs. Craig Riddle is the founder and a coach, explains the philosophy of diversity for athletes.
But it's more of a grassroots program. It's a development program. It's a training program. It allows players of all different skill levels the opportunity to get into the game, to love the game, to learn the basic skills and to develop themselves. And if they believe that they would like to have a career in football, then would recommend the best club route to go or the best club to go to. So it's important for us to have this philosophy because we never know what positions players are going to end up in.
For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Figile Lingwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Get the news, music, and lifestyle of Africa on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Je, una jambo lolote akilini mwako? Je, una shauku kuhusu masuala muhimu? Na je, una maoni ambayo unataka yasikike? Kweli, hili jukwaa ni la kwako. Piga simu au tuandikie kwenda WhatsApp namba alama ya kujumulisha 2760552594 na tutakupigia simu.
Mtangazaji wa habari zetu za Afrika Kusini mjini Johannesburg.
Hivyo unaweza kuwa mshirika kwenye matangazo yetu. Sio mazungumzo tu, ni fursa yako ya kuchangia maoni yako na kushirikiana na jumuiya ya wasikilizaji wanaotamani mtazamo wako. Tufuate kwenye mitandao ya kijamii. Tembelea tovuti yetu www.channelafrica.co.za na uwe tayari kushiriki na kuchangia maoni yako kwenye Channel Africa. Channel Africa, mtazamo wa Kiafrika.
Mornings made better with Peter and Asanda on Rise and Shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 Central African Time on Channel Africa.
And it's time to take a first look at what's been happening on the business front as we say good morning to Taviso Lehuko.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thanks, Peter, and good morning. The Malian court appointed administrator of Barrick Mining's Luolo-Gounkoto complex plans to sell 1 metric ton of gold from the site's storeroom as operations commence again after an almost 6-month suspension. Canadian miner Barrick Gold temporarily halted mining operations in January after the Malian government seized gold stocks from the Luolo-Gounkoto complex. Former Health Minister Sumana Makaji, appointed as temporary administrator last month, enlisted as the state mining company's chairperson and former Luolo-Gounkoto executive Samba Toure to help with operations. The site accounted for 15% of gold output from Barrick, the world's third largest gold miner, before the suspension, which has affected national gold output and reflects a broader conflict between Mali and international miners. The South African Agriculture Minister, John Steenhuisen, says that the looming export tariff hike by the United States on South Africa shows that the country needs urgent reforms. US President Donald Trump announced a 30% tariff on South African exports to the US, effective from the 1st of August. Steenhuisen says there is still time to negotiate before the tariffs kick in. He was delivering his department's $487,857 budget vote in Parliament.
Whilst we can breathe a sigh of relief that this tariff did not come into effect as it was due to tomorrow, it does give us an opportunity to urgently use the next few weeks to be able to try and negotiate a way forward to prevent this. Whilst not explicit, the announcement would signal the end of the African Growth and Opportunity Act, which gives South Africa's duty-free access to the US for more than 6,000 products, including goods and automobiles, agriculture, and textile industries.
The Competition Commission in South Africa has reached an agreement with the Vodacom and Massive, remedying deficiencies in the previous conditions identified by the Competition Tribunal in its prohibition of the merger. This follows engagements between the Commission and the merging parties. The Tribunal had identified the reduction in competition, the overlap in infrastructure, and potential price increases. The Commission says the matter will now proceed to the Competition Appeal Court on an unopposed basis. Competition Commission spokesperson Siyabulela Makunga.
These conditions have since been reconfigured by the parties and are now a subject of consideration by the Competition Appeal Court, which means that the Commission would now go to the Competition Appeal Court not to oppose the appeal applications by the merging parties as well as the Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition.
Aviation expert John Higa has welcomed the commitment by South African Minister of Transport Barbara Creecy to reinforce the strategic position of Airports Company South Africa as the primary provider of airport infrastructure in the country. This comes as calls are mounting for the integration of South Africa's fragmented transport sector to better serve commuters and drive economic growth. Freight and aviation experts are attending the Southern African Transport Conference in Pretoria. The event will run until tomorrow. Higa explains.
I found what the Minister had to say was pretty enlightening in the fact that she has reinforced the strategic position of AXA as the primary provider of airport infrastructure in the country. And also in the medium-term development framework, two of the targets or objectives are aviation-related, both traffic growth and freight growth. The targets are aggressive, but it means that total coordination across the whole of the sector is going to be needed to meet those targets by 2029.
Chinese automakers are expanding in Europe, betting on their competitive pricing and advanced technology to break into markets traditionally dominated by European and American brands amid a global shift towards electric vehicles. This expansion has stoked trade tensions between Brussels and Beijing, including a row over EU tariffs on Chinese-made EVs imposed to protect European producers. Chandugulegeke has the details.
BYD is building an electric car factory in southern Hungary and has announced a new plant for electric buses and trucks in the north of the country. The automaker has launched car sales across most of Europe. On the other hand, Chery will launch sales of its brand in Britain with 2 new SUV models in the coming weeks. It already launched its Omoda brand in Britain in August 2024. Chang'an has launched operations in Europe in March and says it plans to start car sales in 10 markets on the continent this year.
$1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 529. Botswana 13.19. Kenya 128 shilling 494, and Zambia 24 kwacha 17. The BRICS countries in Brazil, the dollar there will cost you 5 ruble 46. Russia, 78 rubles 43. India, it's at 85 rupees 72. China, 7 yuan 17. And in South Africa, the dollar will cost you 17 rand 79. $1 is trading at 73 pence to the British pound and 85 to the euro. A look at commodities markets now. Gold is trading at $3,301 and platinum $1,348 per ounce. Brent crude oil is at $70.01 a barrel. For any business stories that you would like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business here in Johannesburg, I'm Tebisolo Hoku.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. G20 in Africa, exclusive to Channel Africa.
All right, our G20 fact for this Wednesday, the 9th of July, is the G20 works closely with international organizations, including the Financial Stability Board, the International Labour Organization, or the ILO, the International Monetary Fund, or IMF, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, or OECD, the United Nations, or UN, the World Bank, and the World Trade Organization. That's our G20 fact for this morning.
G20 in Africa, exclusive to Channel Africa, championing Africa through solidarity, equality, and sustainability.
The South African Broadcasting Corporation, the SABC Sport, brings you Chasing the Sun, a powerful 5-part documentary series about the country's national rugby team, the Springboks, telling the rousing tale of their path to redemption and ultimate World Cup glory in 2019. Starting 13 July at 7:30 p.m. Central African Time on SABC2, tune in every Sunday for the highs, the heartache, and the heroics that made rugby history. Stream each chapter on SABC Plus anytime, anywhere. No subscriptions needed. Don't miss Chasing the Sun this Sunday at 7:30 p.m. Central African Time on SABC2. Be there when history shines.
Wake up to the essence of the continent. Rise and shine on Channel Africa.
As the United States moves to impose a 30% tariff on South African goods entering its market, concerns are growing over the potential fallout for local businesses. But experts from the law firm Cliff Decker Hofmeyr in South Africa and consulting giant Deloitte say that South African companies can still find a path through the uncertainty. At a recent panel discussion, the two firms explored how geopolitical and geo-economic shifts are reshaping trade and what local importers and exporters can do to adapt. They argue that with early intervention, operational restructuring, and improved access to working capital, businesses can build long-term resilience. Let's find out a little bit more about this from Katlego Legodi.
South Africa forms part of the global community, with those in business raising their concerns over the recent announcement by the United States of America to impose a 30% tariff increase on select South African goods effective from the 1st of August 2025. Law firm Cliff Decker Hofmeyr, CDH, and accounting firm Deloitte have been tracking the impact of the geopolitics on SA businesses. Deloitte's Joe Mitchell-Barre says business uncertainty has slipped back into the heightened COVID-19 days, with the likelihood of many local companies going under.
And the beginning for us in this situation was Liberation Day, 2nd of April, and then Implementation Day, 9th of April, and then Taco Thursday, 10th of April. And these wildly changing positions were causing absolute turmoil in the market. And what it illustrates is that levels of uncertainty are back where we were in the pandemic.
The accounting firm presented its Deloitte Stability Index that measures the extent to which a company is financially stable to adapt, stabilize, and protect their businesses in uncertain times. Deloitte's Ken Afra says the automotive and chemicals industries are particularly vulnerable to U.S. tariffs due to the broader headwinds, but says there are ways to navigate the distress.
We at Deloitte believe very strongly that there's a source of capital that is largely untapped for many businesses. A source of capital that doesn't require investor roadshows. It doesn't require the levering up of the balance sheets. All it requires really is operational diligence and discipline. And that source of capital is the working capital cycle. So our view is that in these uncertain macroeconomic times, there is real opportunity in unlocking cash from the working capital cycle. And we believe that this is one of the top ways to build resilience in organizations.
The gathering saw a panel discussion that speaks to solutions and opportunities for companies.
Uncertainties does create opportunities and has to create opportunities. South African corporates are quite adaptable to going into other jurisdictions, perhaps less developed jurisdictions, and perhaps jurisdictions where there aren't as many large, ready developed opportunities. In other words, there are opportunities there that are much more greenfield.
Discussions also looked at the legalities and the importance of contract management, regulatory compliance in line with anti-corruption policies, and the approach to BEE, with those in business sharing their experiences.
An important lesson for me from today's session was understanding what are the key drivers in helping you survive. One, being a good sort of legal understanding of the regulatory landscape, how you, through very practical, actionable steps such as your contract management and the like, you can navigate the space. Another thing is to understand what are the various options that are available to you if ever you find yourself in distress.
Also coming under the spotlight were opportunities presented by BRICS and the Africa Free Continental Trade Agreement in looking to the future. The role players encouraging SA businesses to be intentional on introducing resilience-building initiatives and scenario planning going forward. The concern is on some highlighted denials from certain companies on a changing global business environment that may see corporations close shop in the near future if they don't embark on proactive engagements in planning better. Katlaron Rodi, SABC News in Sandton.
Georgian journalist Tema Mshvenieredze has sounded the alarm on her country's rapid democratic decline, warning that freedoms gained since the fall of the Soviet Union are now under serious threat. Speaking to Channel Africa during a Freedom of Press seminar in Germany, hosted by the Friedrich Naumann Foundation for Freedom, Tema shared stark parallels between Georgia's struggle and the experiences of nations across Africa and Latin America. She says that Georgia is grappling with Russian influence, anti-European governance, and internal suppression of civil society. She has urged journalists and citizens alike to resist and defend democratic values before it's too late. Channel Africa's reporter Michael Mbewe spoke with Tema Mshvenieredze.
It was the first time for me to have the possibility to connect freely with the broader, world, to Africa, to South, to Latin America, or, I always had the chance to meet with my friends from Eastern European countries. But yes, I agree that there are things that I share with them, culture-wise, history-wise, experience-wise, political-wise. But I couldn't imagine that there are so many similarities on a broader range, on a broader scale. There are so many similarities between Georgia and what is happening in Venezuela. I couldn't imagine that there can be so many similarities of what has South Africa experienced already and what we are through. Okay, it might not be issues about skin color, I'm sorry, but there are a lot of issues of discrimination, segregation, and being sidelined from the community.
How would you describe the political situation in your country at the moment?
At the moment, it's a very rapid democratic backsliding and a very, very realistic risk of losing whatever was achieved since the collapse of Soviet Union and regaining the independence, because we've worked a lot. The society has given a lot to the development and to the stage where we are now, and I'm very, very devastated to actually just say and tell you that in 8 months maybe things have changed drastically.
What are some of the challenges that are on the ground that your country and the people are going through?
It's an increasing influence and threats from Russia, and it's soft power that it's spreading by spreading disinformation, and also a lot of conflicts in the region. Also a government that is openly anti-European, which is basically to explain in a couple of words, is violating the country's constitution, and the constant attacks on freedom of expression, on media, and on civil society. And what's very important is that the same law that has been enacted in Russia and clearly destroyed Russian civil society has been enacted in Georgia. And we see that, just to tell you in short, we have woke up in Russia, I think even faster than Russians did.
Besides the conflict that we're having with Georgia and Russia, the influence that you have spoken about, there is also a conflict between Ukraine and Russia.
It's Russian aggression on Ukraine.
How affected are European countries, including Georgia?
Well, we are affected because we really see... We've been affected before in 2008 when Russians attacked Georgia. We've been affected in the 90s when it attacked and basically occupied 20% of our country's territories. We've been somehow... We know Russia. We have no doubts about its aggressive plans. And the war in Ukraine, which is initiated by Russia, is of course touching us in a way, and it's of course we feel that it might not stop there. Not only that we feel a compassion, and at the same time somehow we're thrilled by the bravery of Ukrainian soldiers, we also feel that Ukraine is basically fighting not only its peace as a country, but also fighting for the peace of Georgia and other European countries. So.
Me, coming from Africa, I was thinking that, of course, Europe is more advanced than Africa. I was thinking that in terms of democracy, the rule of law, freedom of press, and so on, strong institutions, you guys are having it lavishly. But after meeting you guys here, the whole complexion has changed, because I feel much more liberated in South Africa. I'm not speaking on behalf of other African countries, but me as a South African, I feel much more peaceful than what you and other colleagues from Romania, Hungary, and so on have shared in terms of how suppressed and oppressed are in their countries. What are you guys doing, or the public doing, so that this can be redressed and the freedom that everybody think Europe is having can be achieved?
Well, what can I tell you? I can tell you that peace, freedom is something that you fight for, and it should be fought. So I think you feel now peace and more freedom because you fought for that, and you fought a lot, I know, in South Africa. What should civil society do? What journalists should do? We should all fight for the possibility to function in our profession and to function as the society, as a free, independent society. So it's time for us to be professional, but also to fight.
Africa Update on Channel Africa with Lulu Kabu.
The situation in northern Mozambique's Cabo Delgado province continues to deteriorate, with fresh reports revealing a sharp rise in child abductions and mass displacements. What needs to be done to address the root causes of the conflict in your view? And especially just considering that resources are at the center of all of this.
This has now been going on since the end of 2017 in terms of the armed conflict, but the underlying factors have been in play really for generations now in the Mozambican setting, and the socio-economic drivers which have provided space for exploitation by external forces and by radicalized internal elements are really keeping a pilot light under this conflict. And the Mozambican government has struggled both in terms of its hard security response, but also in terms of its soft security and its development response to address the key drivers in play. And so we are likely to see a continuation of this kind of conflict.
Pierce Piju.
Africa Update with Lulu Kabu, 12 to 1 p.m. Central African Time. This Mandela Month, we honor his belief that education is the most powerful weapon to change the world.
Education is one of the most important weapons in a country.
Catch us on DSTV Bouquet 802.
O'clock Central African Time, and that means the entry into the second hour of Channel Africa's Rise and Shine, coming to you live from our Johannesburg studios in South Africa. Thank you for joining us or staying with us if you've been with us since we started at 6. In this hour, we look at least 2 hospitals in Kenya sustaining damage during protests to mark the 35th anniversary of pro-democracy rallies, and going to Nigeria, where more people have been killed by armed groups in the first 6 months of this year than in all of 2024. Those stories and more coming up. My name is Asanda, Beda.
And I'm Peter Ndoro. Thanks for tuning in. Streaming live on www.channelafrica.co.za. And you can also find us on your mobile apps. So look for SABC Plus, and that's where you'll see us. And we're also streaming live on the internet on YouTube. All right, let's begin this hour with the news with Jwalani Tulongwepe.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning. Liberian President Joseph Boakai has launched what his office describes as an unprecedented reconciliation campaign. The campaign will be overseeing memorial services for 2 assassinated presidents and issuing the government's first apology to war victims. The high-profile ceremonies come more than 2 decades after the end of civil conflicts that resulted in some 2,000 deaths and saw widespread atrocities, including massacres, rape, and the use of child soldiers. They also coincide with calls by human rights groups for domestic war crimes prosecutions, which have yet to start despite an executive order to establish a war crimes court last year. At least 2 hospitals in Kenya were damaged during protests to mark the 35th anniversary of pro-democracy rallies. This follows Monday's demonstrations, which left 11 people dead. Tensions have been running high in the East African nation since the death of blogger Albert Ojwang in police custody last month brought back people on the streets a year after anti-government protesters stormed parliament. Branch manager at one of the hospitals situated in the Embakasi neighborhood said that armed men stormed the premises on Monday evening and stole equipment worth over $6,000. South Africa's National Assembly Speaker Thoko Didiza is considering a course of action following KwaZulu-Natal Police Commissioner Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi's allegations. In a media briefing last weekend, Mkhwanazi made damning allegations against the Police Minister Senzo Mchunu and senior police officials. He alleged that Mchunu had ties with criminal syndicates and that he interfered with high-profile criminal investigations. Political parties have asked the Speaker to act on Mkhwanazi's allegations. Parliament's spokesperson Moloto Mothapo.
2 letters have since been received by the Office of the Speaker from political parties requesting a snap debate on the issues raised by General Mkhwanazi in accordance with the rules of the National Assembly. In addition, the chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Police in the National Assembly has written to the Speaker seeking guidance on how the committee should address these matters as they fall within its oversight responsibilities. The Speaker is indeed currently considering all these matters. An appropriate decision will be made.
The member of the Mayoral Committee for Roads and Transport in South Africa's Johannesburg City, Kenny Kunene, says there must be an amendment to the law that requires that an alternative accommodation be provided to those being evicted, especially from hijacked or unsafe buildings. Kunene, together with the city's law enforcement officers, raided several businesses in Johannesburg, where they found many undocumented migrants working in unsafe conditions. Over 60 undocumented migrants have been arrested during a raid at various businesses in the west of Johannesburg. Some of the properties had connected water and electricity illegally. Kunene was speaking on the last day of his tenure as acting Johannesburg mayor.
I think that the same applies to illegal buildings. The law of the country has to be amended on the evictions on properties. Criminals have seen a loophole, and they are now using this loophole that the law says when you evict anyone, you must find alternative accommodation for them.
The death toll in the aftermath of the catastrophic flash flooding in the U.S. state of Texas has risen to 110, while those missing have now exceeded 160. The death toll includes at least 30 children. Sherwin Bryce Pease reports.
The missing number was originally thought to be around 20. That figure has since risen to 161 unaccounted for after devastating rains that led to flash flooding in central Texas that swept cars, homes, trees, and people away. A Christian girls' summer camp was very hard hit, with more than 24 girls along with counselors confirmed dead. Texas Governor Greg Abbott said the new missing tally was based on reports of unaccounted individuals from friends, family, and neighbors. The death toll at 110 thus expected to rise.
For any news stories you would like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa News, I'm Jolani Tulo-Mwebe.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
In our sports headline, Proteas set the new record after completing Test Series clean sweep in Zimbabwe. And Chelsea beat Fluminense to reach Club World Cup final. I'll be back with these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
5 minutes past 7 Central African Time. We go to Nigeria now, where more people have been killed by armed groups in that country in the first 6 months of this year than in all of 2024. That's according to the National Human Rights Commission, which reports over 2,200 deaths from insurgent attacks, banditry, and communal violence. The military is stretched thin. The killings are escalating, and the pressure on the government is mounting. To help us unpack what's driving the crisis and what can be done, we're joined now by Chidi Omeje, a respected Nigerian security analyst who's been following these developments closely. Kedu Chidi Adenma?
Good morning, Asanda. How are you?
I'm good, thank you very much, and thanks for making time for us on this Wednesday.
You're welcome.
These figures are deeply worrying. 2,200 people killed in just 6 months. Is it a surprise to you, these figures by this Human Rights Commission? And what's really behind the surge in violence?
It's not surprising. I mean, it's rather shocking. I mean, it's rather quite unfortunate that, we are having these kind of figures. The figures are depressing, figures are alarming and quite concerning. Because we're talking about human beings here. The issue, the security challenge in this country, Nigeria, is multifaceted. You have a situation where almost the entire, entire regions of the country, going through all manner of security challenges. From the northeast, where the terror groups, Boko Haram and the ISWAP, are still very formidable. To northwest, where you have bandits, cross-border bandits and, organized, mass kidnapping and stuff. Then of course to north central, where we call middle belt, we still have the farmers' header crises. You have, attacks here and there. Then down to the southern part of the country, the southeast, where you have agitations for, separatist agitation and of course some targeted killings here and there. Then down to south, that's Niger Delta region, where you have attack on the maritime assets. You have a cult group in southwest. So there are, all manner of challenges here. And then, of course, that there's a correlation between good governance, or rather, bad governance, and spike in crime and criminality. I personally believe that what drives this thing, first of all, is the fact that we've not been able to get our governance right. And of course, there are other issues like border security at the borders. Don't forget that this Sahel, the geopolitics in the Sahel region, is equally a factor because of course, that the Sahel is the epicenter of terrorism, and then, of course, the fact that you have porous borders, it's easy for these terror groups from across the Sahel, from Mali, from Burkina Faso, and all those kind of places, seeping through to Nigeria, through the northwest and northeast, and then these are exacerbating the challenges. So there's a potpourri of issues, and this is what is driving the crisis. And like you rightly said in your intro, the military have been stretched thin. They're overstretched, but thankfully they're not overwhelmed, so far. But then, of course, if you continue this way, time will come when they'll be overwhelmed, because it does appear that even the police, are not quite doing the internal security job as they're supposed to do. They have more like left the entire job for the military, and the military deployed we have 30 states in this country, and they are deployed in all of these states at a time when you don't have war declared formally. But then you see that military are deployed everywhere. So these are the issues. It is quite complicated, and then and these are exactly the things that you've given rise to the high number of deaths as reported by the Human Rights Commission.
Let's talk about Benue State. Nearly 200 people being killed there in just one incident. How did that happen, and what does it say then about the security gaps in some of these areas?
Benue State is in north central Nigeria, and what the issues in Benue State didn't start now. It's been there for the past almost 2 decades, where we have this farmer header crisis. Issue of the Fulani cattle rearers. They have gone haywire more or less because the original indigenous owners of that particular area, who are predominantly farmers, wouldn't just sit down and allow these guys to come with their cars, cattle, destroy their crops and every now and then. And you see, these are the issues. The problem in Benue is long in coming because the government have not been able to frontally deal with the issues. They've not been able to come out and stamp the authority, and then that political will is always missing. And then that was what gave rise to Yelwata attack. Yelwata is the village that you had about 200 people killed, a couple of weeks back. So the issues in Benue, just like in Plateau State, are quite very, very alive and kicking because we've not been able to deal with the root causes. We've not been able to, stamp our feet and say, look, this thing must stop. Every now and then, you see the government people and the agents, they are always reactive. They're not proactive. they don't deal with these issues. They wait until something happens. You now see all manner of knee-jerk, activities running here and there as if they are doing anything. They are not doing anything to curb these things. As far as I'm concerned, they've not been able to put their foot down to deal with the issues in Benue because even the 200 deaths reported is just one of those. It happens almost every now and then. Yeah. People are being killed almost on daily basis.
Talk about the different approaches of proactive and reactive. In Niger State, meanwhile, police they have reportedly freed 35 kidnapped persons from suspected Boko Haram insurgents. What of this rescue effort can be taken into future efforts and tactical efforts within the police in general?
You see, like I mentioned before, I told you that almost the entire stretch of this country is bedeviled by one grave security challenge or the other. In Niger State, like you mentioned, you have the Boko Haram people who terrorists from the northeast of Borno, but northeast state of Borno. I think they're quite, they made their way down to that Niger State, and they have some kind of sleeper cells, and they've been causing a lot of havoc there. The police are not very effective. If we're talking about dealing with those people, we don't even call police. We talk about the military. The police is almost not even, nobody reckon with them because they're much more interested in what we call VIP protection than doing internal security work. So the issue in Niger State, just like other parts of that area, is quite alarming. And then the ones you talked about, the ones arrested and then released, this has always been a challenge. People don't, it doesn't sit well with Nigerians that some of these guys who are arrested are released, because at the end of the day, they will go back to the crime. So we need to deal with the issue of repentance, or issue of amnesty for these people. We need to be sure who we are granting amnesty, because most times they go back to the crime. So Nigerians are not happy that some of these guys who have been apprehended ended up, in the guise of, amnesty or whatever, they release them back and they go back to the crime.
Chidi, we're going to leave it there for today. Thanks again for your time.
I appreciate you. Thank you.
Chidi Omeje is a Nigerian security analyst joining us on the line from Kaduna this morning.
Você é fluente em português? É apaixonado por rádio e quer trabalhar na África do Sul? Você tem documentos que o qualificam para trabalhar na África do Sul? Nesse caso, podemos ter uma oportunidade para você trabalhar no Canal África. Envie seu currículo e demonstração para Canal África at newsroom@channelafrica.co.za. Lembre-se, se você não receber alguma resposta nossa em 14 dias, isso significa que você não foi selecionado. Canal África, a perspectiva africana. Este é o Caleidoscópio de Canal África, com Remo Samo e João Yabalá.
O surto da cólera em Angola tem causado grande preocupação, afetando já mais de metade das províncias do país. Simultaneamente, a Agência dos Estados Unidos para o Desenvolvimento Internacional, USAID, um dos maiores doadores mundiais de assistência humanitária, decidiu não priorizar os países com maior incidência de malária. Para discutirmos as causas do alastramento da cólera em Angola e os impactos dessa decisão da USAID, convidamos o Dr. Jeremias Agostinho, médico e mestre em saúde pública, para partilhar a sua visão sobre o tema.
A doença, nesse momento, representa o maior risco de saúde pública que nós temos. Nos últimos anos, a nossa preocupação esteve sempre centrado com os casos de malária, os casos de tuberculose e também de infecção por VIH-Sida. A forma como, em pouco menos de 2 meses, os casos de cólera vêm aumentando, acaba por representar, nessa altura, um dos maiores desafios que o país tem. É expectável que, nesta fase, o número de casos venha a aumentar.
De segunda a sexta-feira, das 20 às 21 horas locais, este é o Caleidoscópio do Canal África.
The rhythm of Africa, the pulse of the continent. This is Channel Africa, the African perspective.
We're going to East Africa now, where in Kenya, the country is reeling from the aftermath of violent protests that marked the 35th anniversary of the Saba Saba pro-democracy movement. At least 11 people were reported killed and several others injured as demonstrators clashed with police in Nairobi and in neighboring towns. Among the targets of public anger were hospitals, with at least 2 facilities reportedly vandalized, forcing medical unions to withdraw their personnel over safety concerns. To help us understand the impact of this unrest on healthcare delivery, we're now joined by the chairperson of the Kenya Union of Clinical Officers, Peterson Wachira. Thanks very much indeed for joining us, and welcome to the program.
Good morning, Peter. Thank you for hosting me.
It's a pleasure for us. Peterson, let's begin with some confirmation. Reports indicate that your union has withdrawn clinical officers from Kitengela Hospital and possibly other affected areas. So can you confirm where and why this has happened?
Thank you. We have not withdrawn our members yet. What we have done is that we have put government on notice that if they are not going to ensure that the safety of our members is guaranteed during the next demos and especially in the hotspots, then we are going to invoke the provisions of the Occupational Health and Safety Act, which provides that if any worker, not only a health worker, feels that their safety is compromised, then they're expected to withdraw their services and themselves until remedial actions can be taken and their safety is guaranteed. So as of now, we have not withdrawn. But if then we are not going to have measures put in place to ensure that their safety is safeguarded, in the next demos, we will not be having our members in hospitals for their own safety.
All right. Help us understand a little bit more about what happened at these facilities during the protests, and maybe the scale of damage or the violence that health workers, health providers face during this time.
So what happened is that during the demonstrations, which at some point became rioters, and then one person was shot. When that person was shot, the others rushed him to the hospital. But when they reached the hospital and they were told that this person was already dead and that they could not be admitted into the morgue until they came with a police report, because that is the procedure when you bring in a dead person, then that really angered them. And they were saying that the person was not dead, that it's the medics refusing to attend to their friend. And that is where the chaos started. Then the medics were roughed up, some sustained soft tissue injuries. They had to scatter, some ran away, some had to put on patients' clothes and pretend to be patients. They even walked up to theater. One of them, when they were vandalizing property, hit a glass with his hand, and he really got some deep cuts, bled until he went into shock. And their friends had actually to take him to theater where another procedure was going on, opened and put him inside the theater. And the doctors had to attend to him, though he actually did that while vandalizing the facility. So it was a very traumatizing situation for the health workers. I was there yesterday, and you can tell that people are really traumatized because for some of them, it was a near-death experience.
Okay. This isn't the first time there have been protests in the country, though. Is this the first time you've seen hospitals vandalized?
Yeah, this is actually the first time that we have seen hospitals being vandalized, but it's not the first time we are seeing violence against health workers. Are you getting me?
Yes, I am. And unfortunately, we've run out of time, so we're going to have to leave it there. But we wish your you and your workers in the healthcare facilities all the best going forward, and let's hope that you get the protection that you deserve. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
All right, that was Peterson Wachira, the chairperson of the Kenya Union of Clinical Officers, talking to us about the recent protests and sadly seeing hospital facilities vandalized by some of the protesters.
The Upside, your afternoons just got even better.
Bantu Biko Street by Simpiwe Dana. Ndi ready. Simpiwe, 20 years in song. So what emotions come up when you hear that, hey, you've been doing this for 20 years now?
It almost feels like no time has passed, eh? I just, I know obviously time has passed, but I don't feel it. Even about my age, I'm 45. I always get shocked when I think, oh my God, in 5 years' time, I'll be 50. Because for me as an artist, it's almost like when it comes to certain things, time stands still. And as a result, you find that a lot of artists are very childlike, which, it helps them to always have a fresh approach to issues.
I tell you what, I'm feeling healed just by that.
We take no sides, none whatsoever. We are The Upside. Africa Update on Channel Africa with Lulu Kabu.
The situation in northern Mozambique's Cabo Delgado province continues to deteriorate, with fresh reports revealing a sharp rise in child abductions and mass displacements. What needs to be done to address the root causes of the conflict in your view? And especially just considering that resources are at the center of all of this.
This has now been going on since the end of 2017 in terms of the armed conflict, but the underlying factors have been in play really for generations now in the Mozambican setting, and the socio-economic drivers which have provided space for exploitation by external forces and by radicalized internal elements are really keeping a pilot light under this conflict. And the Mozambican government has struggled both in terms of its hard security response, but also in terms of its soft security and its development response to address the key drivers in play. And so we are likely to see a continuation of this kind of conflict.
Pierce Piju.
Africa Update with Lulu Kabu, 12 to 1 p.m. Central African Time. Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
25 minutes past 7 Central African Time. Still to come on Rise and Shine, we get our news headlines as well as sports and economics news. Right now, though, the United States government has increased pressure on its trading partners this week, sending to heads of several countries, including South Africa and Tunisia, informing them of their new tariff rates. The tariffs, which were scheduled to come into effect today, have now been pushed back, with the exception of China, to August 1st. Speaking to the media on Monday, U.S. President Donald Trump said the tariffs were not definitive, and if the 14 countries affected were to call and do something a different way, he would be open to that. To speak to us about this, we joined on the line by Bernard Owanji, former senior economist at the United Nations, based now in Cameroon. Bernard, thank you for joining us. How are you this morning?
I'm fine. Good morning to you.
We appreciate you making time. Thanks. Outside of importing jobs to the U.S., what can these countries offer the U.S. that would appease the current administration, and should they give in?
Well, I think that every country tries to engage in trade with the United States. United States being the largest economy in the world. So they have to trade with the United States to earn foreign exchange. And the U.S. also is keen to have trading partners in Africa for geopolitical reasons. So it's each side is set to win when you develop trade.
Yeah.
Yes.
Donald Trump has left a room open for some to alter their tariff or his tariffs implementation. What do you make about this reluctance where they keep changing goalposts?
Well, it's not changing goalposts. You know that negotiation is a process that can drag on for several months or sometimes for several years. So he's not changing goalposts. He's just trying to bring his partner, to make his partner amenable to negotiate. You see?
Do you think that the court case is a part of the reason that keeps changing the goalposts or putting a hard stop in terms of when the tariffs will be implemented?
Negotiations are like that. Sometimes you have a cycle of negotiation that collapse. It happens, whether it be in trade or in armed limitation talks or whatever, or even on environment. Negotiation can collapse. You see? So his method, Mr. Donald Trump, is to raise the odds and bring you to negotiation table, and then he expresses his own views, and you express your own views, and then you try to find the deal.
Outside of that, trying to find those deals or negotiate for better deals, are there any legal options available to the affected countries, or even trying to get the World Trade Organization involved?
Well, in recent years, the World Trade Organization there has not been much that we heard from that organization during the past few years. So it's just that Mr. Donald Trump, he sees an opportunity of a winning organization to promote bilateral discussions.
There's also been concerns or a prediction from the U.S. federal chair about the possibility of a rise in inflation in the second half of the year. Do you see a significant rise in the U.S. inflation because of these tariffs, which may then affect the global economy?
Well, you see, when I was a student in economics 50 years ago, we were told that the foreign trade in the United States represents only 5% of GDP, that it does not impact. Today, import and export altogether represent 15% of the United States GDP. So the impact statistically will be very, very minimal because of that quota.
All right. Bernard, we're going to leave it there for today, but thanking you again for your insights.
Yes, I would like to say that South Africa has every interest to find a deal with Washington, because the South African economy is not robust at the moment. For the past 10 years, we have seen a decline in South Africa's economy, especially because of the energy crisis. There is no electricity. There are a lot of business failures, business shutdown because of lack of electricity. The other constraint to the resurgence of South African economy is the problem of land tenure. You see, you have to find a political deal, yes, internally on the issues of land tenures, because once you have a clear land tenure, then you can promote agribusiness, and from agribusiness you move into processing, food processing, and after that, you go into manufacturing.
Bernard, thanks again for your time. We're completely out of time, so we'll leave it there. Bernard Owanji is former senior economist, the United Nations, and based now in Cameroon. 7:31 Central African Time. Let's get our news headlines. Here's Jolane Tulongwepe.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning. Making headlines, a civil society movement Defend Our Democracy is calling on South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa to urgently address the nation, following KwaZulu-Natal Police Commissioner Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi's damning allegations. Mkhwanazi has accused Police Minister Senzo Mchunu and senior police officials of meddling in police investigations and having links to criminal syndicates. Liberian President Joseph Boakai has launched what his office describes as an unprecedented reconciliation campaign. The campaign will be overseeing memorial services for 2 assassinated presidents and issuing the government's first apology to war victims. And finally, U.S. President Donald Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu have met to discuss efforts to reach a ceasefire deal in Gaza. This comes a day after the 2 leaders had dinner at the White House. I will have details on these and other stories at 8 o'clock.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Let's find out what's happening in the world of sport. And the Club World Cup is getting exciting now. And it looks like Chelsea has a real chance. Figile Lingwati, good morning.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Let's first start off with the cricket news. The Proteas set a national record of 10 consecutive test wins after completing an innings and 236-run victory over Zimbabwe on the 3rd day in Bulawayo, wrapping up a 2-0 series clean sweep. The Proteas ran through the rest of the Zimbabwe batting order in the post-lunch session on day 3 to power their way to a thumping innings. Proteas coach Shukri Conrad says the boxes were duly ticked and is pleased with the team's high performance levels.
I think the important and the impressive thing for me was how we managed to keep the standards as high as we set them, both the first test and the second test, batting first. We found ourselves in a little bit of trouble against the new ball, and then how the youngsters, Luandre and Brevi, managed that in the first test. And the same in the second, we found ourselves in trouble, and then Vian played a monumental knock.
There were numerous individual performances that would have caught Conrad's attention, most notably Pretorius' 235 runs and Sima Kodi Yusuf's 10 wickets. And the coach certainly feels they are now part of the discussions moving forward.
Lose a special talent without wanting to jump the gun, I think it's hard to ignore what he's done here. So he's definitely in the discussion for the subcontinent later. I mean, you can see Cody. You can see the value of a really good domestic season. You can see the value of a short stint with Durham in the counties setup. He's a completely, well, let's not say a completely, but it's certainly a lot more disciplined. Really good skill set and hugely impressive. Again, and we talk of gaining a measure of control. He certainly gives you that with a new ball, and he set the tone for us.
Football news now. New signing, João Pedro scored twice on his first start as Chelsea eased to a 2-0 win over Fluminense to seal a spot in the final of the Club World Cup. João Pedro refused to celebrate after either goal against the club with whom he started his career and made 36 top team appearances before moving to England with Watford in 2020. The Brazilian striker opened the scoring in lethal fashion in the 18th minute of the last 4 clash at the MetLife Stadium and struck again shortly before the hour mark as Chelsea set up a showdown with either Real Madrid or Paris Saint-Germain in Sunday's final. Fluminense coach Renato Portaluppi had described his team as the ugly duckling of the tournament due to the enormous difference between their budget and those of the other 3 remaining sides. Let's end with just a few weeks to go before the highly anticipated Total Energies African Nations Championship CHAN 2024. The Confederation of African Football has begun its final round of host nation inspections and readiness workshops in Kenya, Tanzania and Uganda. The first inspection took place last week Friday at Nairobi's Moi International Sports Center, Kasarani, a recently refurbished 50,000 capacity stadium that is set to host Group A matches as well as the final of the competition on the 30th of August 2025. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Figile Lingwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. Call us on +27 63 406 9126 and contribute to the conversation. Hi there. Do you want to elevate your business and give it a voice in South Africa and Africa as a whole? Well, in that case, let Channel Africa make this a possibility. Channel Africa is willing to advertise your business for as little as 30,000 rands or $1,719.18. Access to these great rates. Send all requests to mokoena.ta@sabc. That's MOKOENATA@SABC. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Let's check in with the business world now. Here's Tabiso Lehuko with our economics update.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thanks, Asanda, and good morning. An analyst has echoed the sentiment of the South African government about US President Donald Trump's invalid balance of trade argument as the reason to impose a 30% tariff on the country. Trump said the tariff set for the 1st of August could be reconsidered pending new trade talks with South Africa. Independent economist Peter Bauer says the tariff increase will have a negative impact on South African and businesses alike.
I think South Africa is still significantly important to the United States in terms of trade, especially in terms of the raw materials that we export to the USA, as well as other semi-manufactured goods, and of course, don't forget the agricultural products. I do very much believe that this impact will not only harm South African businesses in terms of quantity which we export, and of course, given the current South African economic condition, particularly the low levels of growth, I think it's also going to affect the American businesses too. For themselves, these kind of tariffs increase the price of goods in America.
The South African Agriculture Minister, John Steenhuisen, says the looming export tariff hike by the United States and South Africa shows that the country needs urgent reforms. US President Donald Trump announced a 30% tariff on South African exports to the US effective from the 1st of August. Steenhuisen says that there is still time to negotiate before the tariffs kick in. He was delivering his department's $487,857 budget vote in Parliament.
Whilst we can breathe a sigh of relief that this tariff did not come into effect as it was due to tomorrow, it does give us an opportunity to urgently use the next few weeks to be able to try and negotiate a way forward to prevent this. Whilst not explicit, the announcement would signal the end of the African Growth and Opportunity Act, which gives South Africa's duty-free access to the US for more than 6,000 products, including goods and automobiles, agriculture, and textile industries.
Aviation expert John Higa has welcomed the commitment by South African Minister of Transport Barbara Creecy to reinforce the strategic position of Airports Company South Africa as the primary provider of airport infrastructure in the country. This comes as calls are mounting for the integration of South Africa's fragmented transport sector to better serve commuters and drive economic growth. Freight and aviation experts are attending the Southern African Transport Conference in Pretoria. The event will run until tomorrow. Higa comments.
I found what the Minister had to say was pretty enlightening in the fact that she has reinforced the strategic position of AXA as the primary provider of airport infrastructure in the country. And also in the medium-term development framework, two of the targets or objectives are aviation-related, both traffic growth and freight growth. The targets are aggressive, but it means that total coordination across the whole of the sector is going to be needed to meet those targets by 2029.
The Malian court-appointed administrator of Barrick Mining's Luolo Gonkoto complex plans to sell 1 metric ton of gold from the site storeroom as operations commence again after an almost 6-month suspension. Canadian miner Barrick Gold temporarily halted mining operations in January after the Malian government seized gold stocks from the Luolo-Gonkotto complex. Former Health Minister Sumana Makachi, appointed as temporary administrator last month, enlisted the state mining company's person and former Luolo-Gonkotto executive Samba Tore to help with operations. The site accounted for 15% of gold output from Barrick, the world's third largest gold miner, before the suspension, which has affected national gold output and reflects a broader conflict between Mali and international miners. The dollar traded close to a 2.5-week high versus major peers, while copper hit an all-time peak overnight after U.S. President Donald Trump broadened his global trade war by threatening a 50% tariff on the metal. Trump also said levies on semiconductors and pharmaceuticals were coming very soon. Weighing on Wall Street on Tuesday, with futures indicating further weaknesses there. However, stock markets around the Asia-Pacific were mixed as investors digested Trump's latest shifting trade salvos. $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 529. Botswana 13.19. Kenya 128 shilling 494, and Zambia 24 kwacha 17. The BRICS countries and Brazil, the dollar will cost you 5 real 46. In Russia 78 rubles 43, India 85 rupees 72, China 7 yuan 17, and in South Africa the dollar will cost you 17 rands 79 cents. $1 is trading at 73 pence to the British pound and 85 to the euro. Gold $3,301, platinum $1,348 per ounce. Brent crude oil is at $70 1 cent a barrel. For any business stories you would like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +711 714 4459 for Channel Africa Business in Johannesburg. I'm Tabisolo Hoko.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
The South African Broadcasting Corporation, SABC Sport, brings you Chasing the Sun. This is a powerful 5-part documentary series about South Africa's national rugby team, the Springboks, telling the rousing tale of their path to redemption and ultimate World Cup glory in 2019. Starting on the 13th of July at 7:30 p.m. Central Africa time on SABC2. Tune in every Sunday for the highs, the heartache and the heroics that made rugby history. Stream each chapter on SABC Plus anytime, anywhere, no subscription needed. Don't miss Chasing the Sun this Sunday at 7:30 p.m. Central Africa time on SABC2, when history shines.
From Cape to Cairo, Dakar to Dar es Salaam, rise and shine with Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda on Channel Africa.
7:45 Central African time it is. You're still with Channel Africa Rise and Shine. As U.S. President Donald Trump imposes a 30% tariff on goods from South Africa, set to take effect on the 1st of August, Jack Ferris, Director and Sector Head for Industrialists, Trade and Manufacturing at Cliff Decker Hofmeyr, believes the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement could provide a much-needed buffer against such global trade shocks. He says African businesses must urgently adapt to navigate the risks posed by growing geopolitical tensions and shifting trade dynamics. Channel Africa's business reporter Innocent Simusa has the details.
Geopolitical uncertainty has disrupted businesses across the African continent, with South African companies among the hardest hit. In response, business leaders are meeting in Johannesburg to identify the sectors most at risk and explore the root causes of their vulnerability. Industry experts point to manufacturing, mining and agriculture as particularly exposed to global tensions. Nastasia Hardeth, Director of the Corporate Department and Turnaround Practice at Clive Decker Hofmeyr says government policy will be crucial in helping industries withstand such instability.
I think it's incredibly important, but I think that more important is for companies to realize what is within their realm of control right now. I think it's something called active acceptance. You accept that right now the geopolitical landscape is a little bit of a roller coaster ride, and what is within my control as a company to kind of navigate this crazy landscape that I'm facing.
Meanwhile, Jackwell Ferris, Director and Sector Head for Industrials, Trade and Manufacturing at Clive Decker Hofmeyr, says Africa must strategically position itself to navigate rising geopolitical tensions and global trade wars. He believes the African Continental Free Trade Area, or AFTA, presents a key solution to shielding the continent from such external shocks.
Yeah, I think from an African perspective, we need to really look at where we're going. So we have the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, and I think what needs to happen with the trade war, it's not just affecting South Africa, it's affecting a number of African countries also. But we need to actually be more intentional. So we have this agreement, but we're not intentional enough, I think, from a political perspective to ensure that we actually have the right domestic policies in place. We have the overarching AfCFTA to encourage and ensure that trade actually happens on a continental level, because that's potentially the solution as part of our discussion today is in terms of adaptation. So we have all of these uncertainties. We have the trade tariffs that has been imposed, which is also a unilateral tariff.
But is Africa doing enough to diversify its trade and investment partnerships to reduce external shocks? Ken Afra, Senior Associate Director, Financial Advisory, Turnaround and Restructuring at Deloitte, weighs in.
So I believe that Africans are very resilient. We've been through a number of shocks, the pandemic, for example, and what we've seen is that corporates have built resilience through those experiences. So cash levels, for example, higher than they were prior to the pandemic. However, of course, with Trump's tariffs coming in, that does cause a huge amount of uncertainty. And so there are additional things that we believe that corporates can look at. For example, their working capital cycle, looking to their funders and taking cost out of their processes to further build resilience on top of the resilience that's already been built following the pandemic.
For Channel Africa News, I am Innocent Samosa in Johannesburg.
Right, it is 7:49 Central African Time, and today in history is a very important day actually in South Sudan, because before today, Sudan was one country, and South Sudan officially declared independence from Sudan following a 2011 referendum, becoming the world's newest country and still the youngest to this day. Salva Kiir was sworn in as first president. The secession marked the end of decades of brutal civil war, but ushered in new challenges for the young nation. And that's something you're going to be looking at in the next hour.
Yes, that's what we're going to be looking at after the 8 o'clock news, and talking about the baby of the continent, a last born of Africa, South Sudan.
Do you remember that time?
I do remember.
Yeah.
I was actually at Radio News at that time. I think I was reading for Radio 2000. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I do remember it. Moments in history that we can say we were there.
All right, let's take a look at this story now, SA Trade, and it's fascinating, this whole trade question that's been playing out at the moment. But in the meantime, as US President Donald Trump imposes this 30% tariff on goods from South Africa, set to take effect on the 1st of August, Jack Ferris, who's Director and Sector Head for Industrials, Trade and Manufacturing at Clive Decker Hofmeyr, believes that South African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement could provide a much-needed buffer against global trade shocks. He says that African businesses must urgently adapt to navigate these risks posed by growing geopolitical tensions and shifting trade dynamics. Channel Africa reporter Innocent Samosa has more for us.
It was a busy morning at Galaga Convention Center as IFED Africa 2025 opened its doors to the public and industry players. The exhibition floor is a hive of innovation, from advanced waste treatment systems to water-saving technologies, all geared towards building a more sustainable future for Africa. Roger MacDonald, representing the Water Research Commission, says water is more than just a commodity, it's central to survival.
In South Africa, water isn't just a commodity, it's a lifeline. We've witnessed firsthand the looming crisis of Day Zero in Cape Town, serving as a stark reminder of our vulnerability. Across our nation, municipalities grapple with alarming levels of non-revenue water that's lost and unbilled, often due to lack of accountability and at consumer levels. This situation impacts us all. To truly secure the future of our water resources, effective management must extend beyond the council's chambers, right into every connection.
Exhibitors say the event is not just about products, it's about positioning Africa as a driver of homegrown solutions. Khan from the Water Science says they are focused on long-term growth and chemical innovation that can shape future infrastructure.
The reason why we need to be here is because water science is more than just a company whereby we want to just go to these factories and clean the water and things like that. We want to be a brand. We want to move globally. We want to move continentally as far as we can go. We have our raw samples from different wastes, from different factories like paper, textile, wash and corn, from the chemicals that we are manufacturing in our own factory. So we find this out, we do our measurements all based on the chemicals that we're using, all based on how the solids separate from the water, from the sample, and then we can design you a plant whereby maybe you lose a depth.
For others, like German-based company Eagerman, IFED Africa is their entry point into the continent. Riyad Ben Slama says their waste processing technology is already used in Europe and Asia, but this is their first African showcase.
We produce shredding machines, separator machines, and compost turner machines. We know already the IFED from other markets in the world, from Europe to Asia, Australia, and so on. And the IFED in Africa is for us something new because we have not been there yet. It's our first experience here. That's why we said, well, it's maybe a good opportunity to come here to present our company, to present our products.
Meanwhile, Clement Mpurwana from Erzen, Germany, says the platform allows companies to explore partnerships that could strengthen green tech and hydrogen solutions.
But just by being here, we could form what we call JVs, joint ventures, because sometimes the technology does require that we partner with someone else. And by us being here, we're able to then see the right eye and say, oh my goodness, if Farm Systems has this that we actually need at the end of our product in order to connect to Hydak and Kaiser. So it's a form of basically just trying to see which we are networking in the right space.
With 2 more days to go, IFED Africa continues to offer a space for collaboration, innovation and climate-conscious thinking, proving that solutions to Africa's challenges can begin right here on its own soil. Reporting for Channel Africa, I am Lebogang Mabange in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Nelson Mandela taught us that courage is not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it.
We should all bear in mind that the greatest glory of living lies not in never falling, but in rising every time you fall.
This Mandela Month, Channel Africa salutes everyday heroes. On Channel Africa, the African perspective. Catch us on Satellite Channel PAS 10. Africa Update on Channel Africa with Lulu Kabu.
The situation in northern Mozambique's Cabo Delgado province continues to deteriorate, with fresh reports revealing a sharp rise in child abductions and mass displacements. What needs to be done to address the root causes of the conflict in your view? And especially just considering that resources are at the center of all of this.
This has now been going on since the end of 2017 in terms of the armed conflict. But the underlying factors have been in play really for generations now in the Mozambican setting, and the socio-economic drivers which have provided space for exploitation by external forces and by radicalized internal elements are really keeping a pilot light under this conflict. And the Mozambican government has struggled both in terms of its hard security response, but also in terms of its soft security and its development response to address the key drivers in play. And so we are likely to see a continuation of this kind of conflict.
Africa Update with Lulu Kabu, 1 p.m. Central African Time. Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Yeah, we're living through very interesting times, and history beckons and calls. July the 9th, 1999, the African Union's precursor signed something called the CERT Declaration. And whilst the formal African Union founding date, the groundwork for replacing the Organization of African Unity, the OAU, with the AU actually began with consultations culminating in the CERT Declaration in Libya, and that was July 9, 1999. And this laid the vision for deeper political and economic integration across the continent. The African Union, I think, by and large, before it became the OAU, before it became the African Union, was by and large about liberating the continent. And so a new era had to be ushered in now that most countries were independent, and that involved creating more economic integration between the states. Sadly, I'm not sure if that ambition has been reached or realized over the years, but that's a debate and a conversation for another day.
Now we enter the third and final hour of Africa Rise and Shine. We say good morning to you from me, Asanda, Beda, and Peter Ndoro.
Yes, indeed. A very good morning to you. You're listening to Channel Africa, the program Rise and Shine on www.channelafrica.co.za. And you can also catch us on our mobile app, SABC Plus. That's what you look for in your App Store or Google Play.
Your views and questions can be expressed across our social media platforms. Our handles are at Channel Africa 1. Let's get to the news update now with Zwalani Tulongwepe. Following her will be Fikile Lingwati with our sports headlines.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning. Civil society movement Defend Our Democracy, or DOD, is calling on South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa to urgently address the nation following KwaZulu-Natal Police Commissioner Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi's damning allegations. Mkhwanazi has accused Police Minister Senzo Mchunu and senior police officials of meddling in police investigations and having links to criminal syndicates. The DOD movement has called for a full, independent judicial commission of inquiry into some criminals' alleged capture of the criminal justice system. Defend Our Democracy Executive Director Naledi Gwaudi.
It's an absolute disaster. It requires the utmost urgency because it speaks to institutions that are tasked with public safety, they're tasked with the rule of law, and a delay will speak to a lackluster reaction. It has to be a high priority because the country right now sits and they are concerned that the people they trust the most in times of need, and there's a loss of faith already.
The Judicial Conduct Tribunal probing sexual harassment allegations against South Africa's Judge President in the Eastern Cape Division, Selby Mbenenge, continues this morning. Mbenenge is accused of sexual harassment between June 2021 and November 2022. The top judge has spent the past 2 days refuting the allegations and coming up with counterclaims. He has now been placed under cross-examination. Evidence leader advocate Salome Skeepers first tested the judge's knowledge of his authority as head of the court in her cross-examination. She also focused on his thoughts on the alleged relationship given his position as well as marital status. The member of the Mayoral Committee for Roads and Transport in South Africa's Johannesburg City, Kenny Kunene, says there must be an amendment to the law that requires that an alternative accommodation be provided to those being evicted, especially from hijacked or unsafe buildings. Kunene, together with the city's law enforcement officers, raided several businesses in Johannesburg where they found many undocumented migrants working in unsafe conditions. Over 60 undocumented migrants have been arrested during a raid at various businesses in the west of Johannesburg. Some of the properties had connected water and electricity illegally. Kunene was speaking on the last day of his tenure as acting Johannesburg mayor.
I think that the same applies to illegal buildings. The law of the country has to be amended on the evictions on properties. Criminals have seen a loophole and they are now using this loophole that the law says when you evict anyone, you must find an alternative accommodation for them.
Liberian President Joseph Boakai has launched what his office describes as an unprecedented reconciliation campaign. The campaign will be overseeing memorial services for 2 assassinated presidents and issuing the government's first apology to war victims. The high-profile ceremonies come more than 2 decades after the end of civil conflicts that resulted in some 2,000 deaths and saw widespread atrocities, including massacres, rape, and the use of child soldiers. They also coincide with calls by human rights groups for domestic war crimes prosecutions, which have yet to start despite an executive order to establish a war crimes court last year. And finally, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says his meeting with US President Donald Trump has focused on efforts to free hostages held in Gaza. He stressed his determination to eliminate the military and government capabilities of Hamas. Netanyahu added that the leaders discussed the consequences and possibilities of the great victory they achieved over Iran. This was Netanyahu's 3rd visit to the US since Trump began his 2nd term on the 20th of January. Trump's Middle East envoy indicated on Monday that Israel and Hamas were nearing an agreement on a ceasefire deal after nearly 2 years of war. For any news stories you would like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa News, I'm Jolani Tulo Webe.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
In our sports headline, Rassi Erasmus says his team surprises is designed to make Italy less comfortable. And Nigeria is set to host the West African Tennis Championships later in the month. I'll be back with these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
Start your day informed, inspired, and entertained. Asanda and Peter bring you Rise and Shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time.
South Sudan marks 14 years of independence today. On this day in 2011, South Sudan became the youngest nation on the continent after breaking away from Sudan. Despite the nation's tremendous natural resources, some say the country's wealth continues to benefit only a small elite. 14 years later, what has the transitional government done for the Sudanese? We're going to be discussing this with Rajab Mohandis, a Sudanese peace and civil rights activist. He's also a signatory to the revitalized agreement on the resolution of the conflict in South Sudan, looking back at how far the people, or if they have, of Sudan have come 14 years later. Rajab, thank you for joining us, and good morning to you here on Rise and Shine. I think we're having a bit of a challenge there in terms of our telephone lines. We're going to try and get a hold of Rajab again. As he was also part of the revitalized agreement on the resolution of the conflict in South Sudan, it would be very interesting to see, in terms of, did that address the root causes of the war between South Sudan, and is that something that it should still be looked at as having to address, or do we now look forward to addressing the issue of famine in Sudan, the South, that is, because that is a matter that has been as a result of the wars that have taken place there and the tensions. Rajab, I understand you back. Can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you. The voice is a little bit low, but I can hear you a bit.
Well, thanks for making time for us to discuss this. 14 years after the independence in 2011 of South Sudan on July 9th, when it ceded from Sudan, what is worthy to note as achievements for the country? Let's start on a positive note.
Yeah, Wes, thank you very much. Now, first, on a positive note, we have a country of our own, for which millions of our people sacrificed to attain. And we owe this to the fallen heroes and heroines in the decades of our struggle for independence. And so at this point, we say we have made a great step and achieved a significant milestone in our course of the struggle for independence. Secondly, we are also happy to note that quite a number of our people were able to get back home in South Sudan. We are aware of many that still remain displaced within and outside the country, but quite a number of people were able to get back to South Sudan. And we may recall in the recent conflict in Sudan, so many South Sudanese managed to return to South Sudan, where the level of conflict was not as it was in Sudan at the time when the crisis was at its peak. So we celebrate this as an achievement that we are here as an independent sovereign state, but definitely with a lot of work to do to realize the dreams and the promise of our independence.
On the other side of things that are not so positive, the country went into 7 years of civil war between President Salva Kiir and Vice President Riek Machar's armed opposition group, as well as other armed groups. Human rights abuses continue. Has this completely dashed hopes for the realization of the country's dreams?
Yes, quite unfortunately, this has dashed hopes in so many of our citizens, and many people really believe that it is no longer possible for us to continue to coexist and function as a state. And this difficulty that we have gone through of the violence, of the killings, the displacements, the destruction, everything that we suffered even during the long struggles for our independence has haunted us since independence. And this unfortunate development has caused a lot of fracturing in our social fabric, causing so many of our citizens now to begin thinking about even breaking the country further into smaller states if we cannot continue to exist peacefully. So this is an unfortunate part, but the positive aspect on this is that many of our citizens still believe that it is possible for us to find our ways out of this difficulty and out of this crisis. And many are exerting efforts, especially from the civil society perspective, and also some of the political leaders, to find a lasting solution to this. And we have the support of some of the actors in the region and the wider international community, helping to try to pull us together in finding a solution out of this situation.
Another positive to note was violence having decreased after the signing of a peace deal in February of 2020, which led to the revitalized transitional government of national unity. Would you say this addresses or addressed the root causes of the war between the South Sudanese government, the Sudan People's Liberation Army, opposition, and militias?
Well, yes, this agreement provided a framework sufficient enough for us to resolve the outstanding issues or the root causes of the conflict in the country. Unfortunately, the agreement has not been fully implemented. And in addition to this agreement, we have a lot of other frameworks that were developed throughout the course of our liberation struggle. If you reflect back on the Comprehensive Peace Agreement, if you reflect back on the literature of the liberation struggle, there is definitely no shortage of a blueprint for us to govern the country well. And so the crisis that haunts us today is deliberate. It is because the political leaders have simply abandoned the purpose of our struggle for independence. Even when an agreement is signed, they do not commit to implement the agreement. So it is not so much about the failure to address the root causes, but it is the failure to implement this agreement signed in 2018 to be able to deliver on the commitments made in those agreements.
And on that point then, should it still be top of the agenda now to address the root causes of the war, or rather look forward to renewed efforts to address things like famine and what you mentioned and the realization of other of South Sudan's emancipation dreams?
Well, there are options, a lot of alternatives that people are pursuing, the political actors are pursuing. The government and some of the armed opposition groups are using violence as a means to resolve the conflicts. At the community levels, with support from political actors, there are violence ongoing as well. Some of these are politically motivated, others are simply violence among the communities. And we have seen the cost of this violence, the cost in terms of human lives, in terms of destruction, in terms of humanitarian situation, the economy. And so we can say with confidence that this violent resolution of the conflicts do not offer any path out. And so the least cost-effective means to resolve these conflicts is to use a non-violent political process. And that means the non-violent political process of agreeing dialogue and reaching agreements and committing to implement those agreements fully apply as the best option for us. And we think that this is the path we would encourage the region and the wider international community and all the South Sudanese political and civic groups to pursue. It is possible for us to sit down and talk to ourselves and understand ourselves and simply pick any of these frameworks that we already have, these agreements or the frameworks developed in the course of the liberation struggles that define the country we wanted, as opposed to what we used to call the old Sudan that kept us in conflicts for a very long time. So from a civil rights perspective, and as someone who has participated so much in these peace processes, I would encourage that we use these political processes as the least costly approach to finding lasting solutions to the situation in our country. It is simple. We already have a lot of these commitments made. It's simply a matter of implementing any one of them, and we will be out of this crisis.
15 minutes past 8 Central African time. We are in conversation with Sudanese peace and civil rights activist who's also a signatory to the revitalized agreement on the resolution of the conflict in South Sudan, Rajab Mohandis. We're talking also marking 14 years of Independence Day in the country and how far the country has come and what the government has done for the Sudanese. So talking of the implementation of this revitalized transitional government of national unity, Rajab, what from that can serve as lessons moving forward into other possible peace accords to be done differently?
Well, thank you. First of all, let me clarify that, until today, many of our friends on the continent and around the world still refer to us as Sudanese. We are actually South Sudanese. South Sudan is an independent sovereign state from Sudan. In terms of lessons learned, number one is that the political the violence has not been helpful in any way. It has only caused more destruction and fragmented our society. So as an important lesson, we should transition from a violence approach to the conflicts into dialogue among ourselves and to be able to listen to one another. Number two is to ensure that commitments we make in those agreements that we sign should be fully implemented. And implementing those commitments does not disadvantage any one of us, but helps to restore development and prosperity for all. Number three is that those who help us in the region to reach agreements should continue to support through the implementation of the agreement in good faith. Number four is that the parties, the political actors, the military actors should know that the country belongs to all South Sudanese, and participating in the peace processes and especially implementation is not an exclusive reserve of military and political actors alone. The civic groups, including the civil society, the women groups, the religious leaders, academia, the youth, and all the South Sudanese diaspora communities have a role to play. And we need to encourage this inclusive engagement of all citizens to ensure that we contribute equally to peace. And it is also important to note that we cannot deliver peace in our country without managing the resources, our resources responsibly. We are on top of the list of the most corrupt countries in the world. And so we want to encourage all South Sudanese actors, and especially the political leaders, that there should be good stewardship in managing the resources of the country for the betterment of all our citizens, so that these resources are not only taken away by a few and by foreign actors, leaving the country unable to fulfill its financial obligations to deliver services and also to improve the lives of the citizens in the country. At this point, we want, I personally would recommend strongly that this 14th independence anniversary should serve as a point of reflection for us to be able to get back to the promises that we made for ourselves at independence 14 years ago.
Right. Let's leave it there for now, Rajab, because we want to add another voice to this chat, but we appreciate your time.
You're welcome. Most welcome.
Rajab Mohandis is a Sudanese peace and civil rights activist, also a signatory to the revitalized agreement on the resolution of the conflict of South Sudan. So the other voice we want to add to this conversation is that of South Sudanese lawyer James David Collock. And we welcome you, James, to the chat. How are you this Wednesday?
James? Hello, good morning.
Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you, please.
Right. What does this day mean for the people of South Sudan? It's 14 years since the Independence Day.
Thank you, first of all, for having me. And before I proceed, I would like to wish all our citizens a happy Independence Day. Obviously, every day we celebrate independence. The people of South Sudan celebrate it with the pride. In 2011, when we became a country, there was a huge celebration, and there was a lot of hope in terms of provide the conducive environment for people of South Sudan and a country that exhibit high level of freedom, which is actually the reason why South Sudanese went to war in the first place. But today, as we celebrate the 14th Independence Day, I am quite convinced that the people of South Sudan did not anticipate that the celebration as of today would have been in the nature where we are today. We are quite confident that there is a huge frustration in terms of the way the people of South Sudan expected the country as from the day of independence and through the 14 days as we celebrate today. So this celebration, as much as we are proud to be a country, it is a celebration that is marked by bitterness, that is marked by agony, that is marked by frustration over the kind of leadership that we have in the country.
Today, one of the ripple effects then from these wars in South Sudan that has faced, because people are still being killed and people are still being displaced, one of those ripple effects is famine. When you look at the role agriculture is being placed in terms of how that could be a possible turnaround strategy, they've been a tool of the South Sudanese looking to improve their livelihoods through and dealing with poverty through the organization of cooperatives. Can this be maintained as a contributor to the economy of the country and not just self-subsistence? And also, we just marked International Day of Cooperatives on July 5th.
Well, when we talked about famine and inability of South Sudanese to sustain themselves through agriculture, I would just say the suffering that we're experiencing out of this has been a self-inflicted suffering. South Sudan has got a capacity to produce food to feed not only South Sudan, but the region and the world. Unfortunately, the environment currently cannot sustain the ability of South Sudanese to be able to be self-sustaining and be able to produce food for themselves. Now, the entire part of South Sudan known as the Equatorial region has the potential of sustaining the country in terms of food production. Unfortunately, the insecurity cannot even make anybody move 200 meters to the field to be able to dig for themselves and send food to the market. Now, I'm not quite sure whether we are able to stand up and be able to be counted as far as the issue of food production or even arrangement as far as cooperatives are concerned. Because right now, for us to be able to have very efficient cooperative societies that can be able to support farmers and be able to export food, we need security, which exactly now is lacking. And this is why we lament today as we celebrate this Independence Day.
What about cultural and religious differences in one of the youngest nations? From a demographic perspective, historically, Sudan was divided into 6 provinces, which are mostly Arab and Muslim, and the southern 3 provinces following African and Christian religions. Do these groupings have much in common to contribute to lowering tensions in the country?
Well, when you look at the time that we became independent, and especially before the outbreak of the conflict in 2013, South Sudanese have exhibited a very clear unity, whether it is culturally, ethnically, or politically. But since the conflict broke out in 2013, all this has been shattered by the fact that everything, including cultural unity, has been politicized, and that right now South Sudanese continue to still look at themselves as ethnically divided nation. So this political division has created a lot of challenges in terms of cultural unity that we exhibited even before we became an independent. So we have still challenges. Of course, yes, the religious institutions are trying to bring people together, but we have a threat of political divide where most of the leaders actually run through the divisions that they exhibit in the South Sudan society. So we are still struggling. We hope that eventually we're able to go back to the state in which we were even before independence. We were probably more culturally united or religiously united than it is today, even 14 days as we celebrate independence. Unfortunately, we still have these challenges, and we hope that this political divide will be dealt with such that the country looks at themselves as South Sudan, other than looking at themselves as ethnically divided country that continues to lament about themselves.
We talk of agriculture as a resource, especially through the foundations of cooperatives. Another resource, though, is oil between Sudan and South Sudan, which was a previous point of contention for tensions. But how can this resource now be used to benefit both countries and contribute towards good relations with the region in collaborating with South Sudan on peace efforts and economic recovery?
First of all, our late leader, Dr. John Garang, did make it very clear when we're almost moving towards the comprehensive peace agreement that yes, South Sudan has got huge resources, and one of them is oil. But in his vision, he thought that the oil should be used to actually, for purposes of production of agriculture, that it should be able to be used as an engine to run other sectors of the economy other than looking at it entirely as the only source of running the economy. Unfortunately, 14 years since the independence, we still continue to see South Sudan rely only on the oil. But again, despite the huge proceeds that come out of the oil, the money has gone to individuals' pocket. Today, the country itself is not even able to pay its civil servant, simply because the little that we get from the oil resources has been corrupted, and it has gone to sustain certain clique of individuals in the government. The only way in which we can be able to move forward is, first of all, to create the necessary conducive environment to be able to promote other sectors of the economy, such as the agriculture that we talked about, such as tourism, so that South Sudan can be able to move forward. But above all, without putting in place a formidable mechanisms of addressing corruption, South Sudan is not going to move anywhere, even if we are running through oil or using other sectors of the economy, because this money that comes, these resources that come supposedly to develop South Sudan and provide services is terribly going to certain individuals in the manner of corrupt practices that has been exhibited since we became independent.
Attacks on international aid operations have also exacerbated the major problems faced by South Sudan. How should these be tackled to move one of the poorest nations in the world to one in positive recovery and peace?
I think all these attacks that we see is simply a manifestation of lawlessness, and lawlessness that has emanated because the government itself is not able to control emerging pockets of insecurity, whether it is along major roads or even in most of the cities around the country. I think it is a huge challenge that because of the situation in the country, most of those soldiers go on the major roads to create roadblocks that are intended to extort the public, including the humanitarian organization. Without helping to address these issues, even including waterways, is going to be a huge problem in a country that is hugely dependable on foreign aid. So it is up to the leaders of South Sudan to ensure that we have got a conducive environment of making sure that everybody, including humanitarian workers who are operating inside South Sudan, have got the necessary conducive environment to be able to provide service to the people.
Right.
These are organizations that are coming in to complement a government that has literally failed to provide service to its people. Now, if we take this for granted and continue to create a unnecessary environment of attacking humanitarian vehicles, of killing humanitarian workers, then we are bound to have problems, not only within the country, but even the region and internationally.
James,
we are going to be isolated, which of course is now happening, and this is a huge problem.
Thanks for your time, and we appreciate it, James. David Kolok, South Sudanese lawyer, and that's where we're going to leave that chat because we need to head to headlines. It's 8:31 Central African Time. Good morning, Jalani Tulo Ngwepe.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning. Making headlines, civil society movement Defend Our Democracy is calling on South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa to urgently address the nation following KwaZulu-Natal Police Commissioner Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi's damning allegations. Mkhwanazi has accused Police Minister Senzo Mchunu and senior police officials of meddling in police investigations and having links to criminal syndicates. The Judicial Conduct Tribunal probing sexual harassment allegations against South Africa's Judge President in the Eastern Cape Division, Selby Mbenenge, continues this morning. Mbenenge is accused of sexual harassment between June 2021 and November 2022. And finally, US President Donald Trump says he's not happy with his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin. He was speaking to the media during a cabinet meeting at the White House. I will have details on these and other stories at 9 o'clock.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
It's time for some sport. Good morning, Fikile Lingwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Good morning, Peter. We kick off with rugby news. The Springboks coaching team has made 8 changes to the team's starting lineup for the second test against Italy in Gqeberha this weekend. These include a new centre pairing of Andre Esterhuizen and Kanan Moody, while Grant Williams and Manny Lebok will start at halfback. Veli Leroux is also set to capture his 100th test cap, making him the 8th Springbok to achieve this feat. Salman Murat will take over the captaincy for this game as Siya Kolisi deals with a small injury. The Springbok team features 7 players from the side that defeated Italy 42-24 in Pretoria last week. New captain Salman Murat last captained the Boks in their 2024 Rugby Championship match against the Pumas in Argentina. Team coach Rassie Erasmus says the changes in the team have nothing to do with last week's performance.
But the changes are more respect for Italy than our performance itself, because we had a very experienced team, and I guess that makes it really difficult for the opposition to play against, but very easy to analyze in terms of how you know the strengths and weaknesses of opposition, where it's very tough for us to have really see where's there, maybe you know where the players' individual strengths are, but you don't know where their weaknesses are because you haven't played against them before. And now we had one game against them, and the guys who played last week could transfer a lot of knowledge to the guys playing this week.
Springbok winger Magazole Mabimbi says it's good to be back in his home province.
I think all of us as a team, we're very excited to be back here. I think the last time we were here was after COVID 2001. And also we did see the kind of the love the time we arrived at the airport at the same time. And also when we're playing in PE for the East London, it just hit different because people don't experience what other people experience to the cities. Can be sharks, can be storms at the same time. So it's very rare Springbok player here. So I'm sure people are very excited to come in numbers to watch us.
Now, Nigeria is set to host the 2025 IWTF Africa West Regional Championships from the 16th to the 19th of July at the Molade Okoya Thomas Hall, Teslin Balogun Stadium in Lagos. The championship will bring together top table tennis talents from across West Africa, including teams from Benin Republic, Burkina Faso, Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana, Guinea, Liberia, Niger Republic, and Sierra Leone. Nigeria, the defending champion in the women's team category, will look to maintain its dominance after clinching the title last year in Lome. Togo, the reigning men's team champion, will also be looking to defend its crown. In the men's singles event, Nigeria's top-ranked player Matthew Kuti will return to defend his title. Kuti made headlines last year by defeating Cote d'Ivoire Oba Kizito 4-1 to win his first regional singles crown. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Fidel Ngwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. Download the SABC app and take Channel Africa with you everywhere you go.
Zilipendwa na Abedi Jean de la Croix.
Anaitwa Daniel Etienne Benson. Huyu alizaliwa mwaka 1997, ilikuwa Mei 14, na anajulikana kitaalamu kabisa kwa jina la muziki BNXN. Haya, ni mwanamuziki huyo, ni mwimbaji kutoka nchini Nigeria, mtunzi wa nyimbo na mtayarishaji wa record label. Ameshirikiana na Rema kwenye wimbo huu. Rema vile vile ni msanii kutoka huko nchini Nigeria.
Zilipendwa kila Jumamosi kuanzia saa 12 kamili majira ya Afrika ya Kati hadi saa 1 kamili majira ya Afrika ya Kati.
Let's check in with the world of business now. Huko with our economics news.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thanks, Asanda, and good morning. South Africa's Minister of Finance, Inoko Tongwana, says government's efforts to get off the international grey list are progressing well. South Africa was grey-listed by the Financial Action Task Force in 2023, flagging concerns over anti-money laundering programs and the problem of counter-terrorist financing. Some members of parliament have complimented the National Treasury's efforts that may lead to the country being removed from the list early next year. Delivering the Treasury's vote in Parliament, Kotongwana says government's wide approach has assisted the process.
But to complement and finalize this work, a general laws anti-money laundering and combating terrorism finance bill to further improve our ability to combat money laundering, terrorism financing, and proliferation financing is being finalized for another round of public comment and tabling in Parliament in the quarter of 2025.
South Africa's Finance Minister, Inoko Tongwana, has confirmed that a review of the budgetary process has been completed. For the first time in democratic South Africa, the tabling of the national budget was called off and then challenged in court, mainly due to differences among partners of the Government of National Unity. It took Kotongwana 3 attempts to successfully table the 2025 budget. He delivered his department's $5.16 billion budget vote in the National Assembly yesterday.
Clearly, over the term, all of us have realized that there's a substantial need to do a review of the budget process. And that review has resulted in actionable performance proposal, of which the short-term changes will be implemented in 2026 budget process. The changes include cabinet approval of a budget guidelines in order to strengthen the technical and political interface.
An analyst has echoed that the sentiment of the South African government about US President Donald Trump's invalid balance of trade argument as the reason to impose a 30% tariff on the country. Trump said the tariff was set for the 1st of August and could be reconsidered pending new trade talks with South Africa. Independent economist Peter Bauer says the tariff increase will have a negative impact on South African and US businesses alike.
think South Africa is still significantly important to the United States in terms of trade, especially in terms of the raw materials that we export to the USA, as well as other semi-manufactured goods, and of course, don't forget the agricultural products. I do very much believe that this impact will not only harm South African businesses in terms of, quantity which we export, and of course, given the current South African economic condition, particularly the low levels of growth, I think it's also going to affect the American businesses too. For themselves, these kind of tariffs increase the price of goods in America.
Ghana's President John Dramani Mahama has launched a task force backed by security forces to address illegal gold trading as Africa's top producer seeks to recover billions of dollars lost to smuggling. The task force is Ghana's first national anti-gold smuggling initiative. The government has previously launched efforts to sanitize artisanal mining, but these were unsuccessful in curbing illegal extraction and preventing revenue losses as a plague most African gold producers. Oil prices have urged down after rising to two-week highs in the previous season. This as investors awaited new developments on U.S. tariffs amid expectations of rising crude inventories in the United States. Brent crude futures slipped to 7 South African cents, or rather US cents, or 0.1% at $70.8 US a barrel. US West Texas Intermediate crude fell 8 US cents, or 0.1% to $68.25 a barrel. $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 529. Botswana 13.19. Kenya 128 shilling 494, and Zambia 24 kwacha 17. The BRICS countries in Brazil, the dollar will cost you 5 real 46. Russia 78 rubles 43. India 85 rupees 72. China 7 yuan 17. And in South Africa, the dollar will cost you 17 rand 79 cents. $1 is trading at 73 pence to the British pound and 85 to the euro. Gold is trading at $3,301, and platinum at $1,348 per ounce. Brent crude oil is at $70.01 a barrel. For any business stories you would like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business in Johannesburg, I'm Tabisolo Hoko.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
The South African Broadcasting Corporation, SABC Sports, brings you Chasing the Sun, a powerful 5-part documentary series about the country's national rugby team, the Springboks, telling the rousing tale of their path to redemption and ultimate World Cup glory in 2019. Starting 13 July at 7:30 p.m. Central African Time on SABC2, tune in every Sunday for the highs, the heartache, and the heroes that made rugby history. Stream each chapter on SABC Plus anytime, anywhere. No subscription needed. Don't miss Chasing the Sun this Sunday at 7:30 p.m. Central African Time on SABC2. Be there when history shines.
From Cape to Cairo, Dakar to Dar es Salaam, rise and shine with Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda on Channel Africa.
The South African Human Rights Commission is convening a high-level summit this week focused on one of the most pressing issues in the digital era, disinformation and its impact on human rights. The summit, titled Human Rights and Disinformation, brings together local and international partners, including human rights institutions from across Africa and beyond. And the aim is to try and unpack how false and misleading information undermines constitutional rights, democratic participation, public trust, and even access to essential services. And to discuss the goals of the summit and the growing threat posed by disinformation, we're now joined by the chairperson of the South African Human Rights Commission, Chris Nissen. Thanks so much indeed for joining us, and welcome to you. Hello, Chris. Oh gosh, I'm on a completely different story here. I've lost my mind a little bit. Forgive me, listeners and viewers. My mind was focused on another story that we've been tracking. And in fact, what we're looking at now is a teenage pregnancy in South Africa. Teenage pregnancy continues to be a major public health and social crisis in South Africa, with over 90,000 births recorded in recent years amongst girls aged between 10 and 19. And that's according to Statistics South Africa and the Department of Health. The situation has far-reaching implications not only for the physical and mental health of young mothers, but also for their education, their safety, and long-term socio-economic opportunities. In response, the Department of Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities is today hosting a national stakeholder engagement aimed at developing urgent interventions. And joining us now to discuss the scale of the problem and what's being done to address it is the Deputy Minister in the Presidency for Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities, Mapaseka Steve Letsika. Deputy Minister, thanks very much indeed for joining us, and welcome to you.
Good morning to you, Peter, and to the listeners of Channel Africa. Thank you for the invitation.
So these numbers are deeply concerning. What are the key factors do you think are driving such high rates of teenage pregnancy in South Africa?
Indeed, Peter, there are quite a number of things that we have to look into. This is not just a public health issue, but it's a social and economic emergency that we have to look into. These are fueled by a number of issues. First, it's around sexual abuse and statutory rape, gender-based violence, poverty, education exclusion, substance use and abuse. All these are compounded factors that contribute to the toxic element of this activities that are taking place that leads to child and teenage pregnancy. But we know this is happening in our homes, it's happening in our schools, it's happening in our places of safety in communities. And the fact that we continue to leave sexual abuse and exploitation of children unattended to then tells us in terms of how we are not prepared to address these issues as a whole of society. We have put legal frameworks, we have put programs, but we have to consolidate it into one where we hold each other accountable, including parents and caregivers who are primary in terms of making sure that the children are safe, and all other key players who then contribute to this must be held accountable.
I know that there are delegates from other parts of the continent that are going to be here. Are you finding that a lot of the issues that South Africa is facing is similar in other states across the continent?
Well, I mean, it's happening a lot in terms of how we have consistently allowed not to expand into scientific evidence. UNESCO released a couple of years ago a comprehensive sexuality education about how young people, both girls and boys, could be empowered to make the right kind of decision. One that speaks about their own bodies, that also speaks about knowing what is right and what is wrong. So we are not seeing a high level of comprehensive sexuality education implemented everywhere. This was done in 21 countries in Africa, where we're seeing that there's a pushback by teachers, by parents, but it's actually evidence-based that it's necessary for any child's development. So we are seeing it not only in South Africa, but in many other parts of Africa. The other element is the issue of child marriage. As much as it's not a significant crisis in South Africa, but in other parts, Malawi managed to deal with it from the leadership that was provided by traditional leaders. And many other countries are attending to the issue of forced child marriages, which is not acceptable. But the question that we are all ought to address, like here in South Africa, we are saying the age of consent, it's 16. Any child that is involved in sexual activity with an adult, above the age of 16 is regarded as statutory rapes. Those are our laws. So when you then confront this issue, you mustn't confront it just as a kind of a tick box exercise. It's really about what criminal activity has taken place and how have we dealt with it directly without favor or fear of anything.
I would imagine there's also an issue of children sleeping with other children and getting pregnant.
Correct.
This must be a concern, and how does one manage that?
That's correct. And this is why we have to pay attention on those elements that addresses the issue of ensuring that the kids, both boys and girls, are empowered to know what is right and wrong. And we are aware this you cannot treat as statutory rape given the legislation or policy framework that we have as our country. But when you do have children, whether they're 15-year-olds are having sex and so forth, how do you then deal with it from a kind of social, psychological, as well as support health-wise that is needed to address the issue of sexual behavioral activities?
Do you think that there's enough collaboration between different departments to try and deal with this? I mean, you've got on the one hand health, you've got basic education, social development, and it seems as if all of these kinds of departments need to be working together on this single issue.
Must be seen as a unison approach in this. Education, health, social development, justice, police, home affairs, all of them, including corporate governance, which is COCTA dealing with local government, have got a specific responsibility. And it is why we as a department responsible for women, youth, and persons with disability are charged with the responsibility first to deal with convening, ensuring there's proper coordination of all the key stakeholders, don't fail the young people that we see in our communities. So all departments can work in silos, and under this administration led by President Ramaphosa, it consistently says that a unison approach, but also an accountable approach to discharge our responsibility. And paying attention on child and teenage pregnancy is one of it that forces us to have a intersectoral and interdepartmental coordination that actually have all players discharging their responsibility.
A little bit earlier, you talked about some cultural practices like child marriages that may be pervasive in our societies. Are there other cultural attitudes that perhaps make it easier for people to observe? And I remember being in a restaurant in the Eastern Cape, and I saw a man sitting with two young girls that clearly looked like primary school girls, even though they had makeup on. And it just seems as if this is a norm that we see and we accept.
You know, Peter, we have normalized very problematic behavior. Patriarchy has actually extended its wings to really influence what happens culturally, you know, how young people, how children are perceived in society. We've normalized not looking at children as children. We've normalized looking at children as object, as potential partners, and so forth. And we are seeing it not only just from a cultural point of view, but also even in our homes. Parents are using children to deal with the issue of poverty. I've seen many cases where parents says, "Oh no, that gentleman will take care of us. You must go and just see him." How have we normalized that we are implementing transactional sex? We have normalized children by having sex with older men. It's unacceptable behavior, and we are not seeing a lot of parents, a lot of caregivers, traditional and faith leaders condoning these norms that underline child and teenage pregnancy. And I think this is where it starts. It's in the belly of society, of what we do. And this is why when parents and caregivers fail to take their role, play their role, the state must come in because we must take the interest of the child at heart. And to then say social work.
All right. Deputy Minister, your line has got so terrible. We're losing you, but I think we pretty much heard the nub of what you're talking to us about, and we wish you the very best with the conference. And let's catch up with you again at the end, and perhaps get some learnings from it. All right, that's the Deputy Minister in the Presidency in South Africa for women, youth, and persons with disabilities. And they're having an important gathering this week talking about teenage pregnancies. And yeah, it's quite rife. It's a problem, actually, sadly, not even just on the continent, Asanda. It's something that we're seeing across the world. Yeah. And I'm just wondering what it is. Because on the one hand, back in the day, our parents actually got married quite young, actually, relatively to nowadays. So whilst we might be getting married later, it seems that there's still some of those issues. Back in the day, we weren't so shocked when people got married young, but for some reason, teenage pregnancies continues to be an issue.
Yeah. It's a big one, a big issue, and the girls suffer the most because they need to stop their schooling.
And the boys,
and sometimes the boys, and they can even run away and deny that that's their responsibility. Right, coming up, we have On the Move with Palesa and Benjamin. Good morning.
Yes, so today on The Move, we're speaking about an issue that has actually come up recently through a court case, and that has really posed the question, what am I saying sometimes when I'm texting people that I know, all people? We're speaking about emojis.
Yeah.
And they've become a staple, obviously, in the way that we communicate, but they can also add color, tone, and emotion to any conversation, and also legal or social consequences.
And confusion sometimes.
And the added layer is there are different types of emojis that have different meanings for different generations. So millennial emojis might mean something different. The Gen Zs have their own emojis that mean something different. And the Gen Alphas have their new emojis that mean something different. You could be using the wrong emojis.
But you know what? I play safe. I just use the smile,
the
cry,
the heart.
The heart.
Yes.
There's this one, the thumbs up one.
It
means very different things for us as parents and for the kids.
Really?
Because for a parent, for a child to do this is very dismissive. But for the child, they're saying, okay.
Yeah.
So that's
and
another
also you say you
difference
only
in
use the cry, which is safe. It's not, because the cry can also mean like laughing really terribly. The cry could also mean like I'm laughing until I cry.
I think I'm just going to write in full now.
let's just write words and then the emoji
and
should
leave
be
the
last.
emojis alone. So we're going to be unpacking that and also just looking at it as well from the different generational perspectives and maybe see if we actually know what we're emojiing about.
Well, do you know what? Actually, I think it's an extension of things like slang.
Yes, of course.
So the words that young people use were not the same when we were young.
Of course.
Anyway.
So it is an extension of slang.
Yeah. Okay. So
I just threw one at you now, Cap.
No cap there.
On that point.
So that's Palesa and Benjamin after the 9 o'clock news. On the Move from me and Asanda Beda.